The development of mirages, the pretense of a given world, this is where he lives. But as soon as he opens his eyes, he can immediately see the whole essence of this world reality. He, who decided to punish the gods, will show his blood. One day, in the city of Yunhai, First Central Hospital, Ophthalmology Department. In the first ophthalmology department, Dr. Zhao saw a patient named Zhang Yu. He looked at the patient's chart and thought, maybe there's a mistake in the number? Isn't this period X? He asked him to describe the symptoms again. Zhang Yu said that his eyes do not see so clearly. His look changed, and he said that when looking at an object, a red streak appears. There was a red aura emanating from Dr. Zhao. He asked what number is on the strip. The red bar appeared and dropped to 18%. He named the number and asked, is this his age? Dr. Zhao was surprised and wondered how this was even possible. Are you sure this guy isn't in the wrong department? Zhang Yu looked at the doctor and thought that if this is the death rate, then 18% is not that much, right? And he looks quite energetic. The doctor asked if he had taken alcohol. Zhang Yu responded by asking right now. Dr. Zhao remained silent, and Zhang Yu noticed the expression on his face and shook his head to the sides. He apologized and said he was a little distracted. The doctor said he needed to concentrate. He got up from his chair and said that he would examine his eyes. He took out a flashlight and shined it into his eye. He told Zhang Yu to look to the right, then to the left. He turned off the flashlight and said that his eyes looked normal. Zhang Yu closed his eyes to restore his vision after the flashlight and opened them a second later. After seeing a doctor, he went out into the corridor and carefully examined all the people. Above them all there was a red stripe with percentages. He smiled and thought that his conjunctivitis had even been cured. It seemed that he had regained his sight. He wondered, but what about the blood streaks? Maybe he can put it to good use. He walked out of the First Central Hospital, and the news was shown on the big screen above. In order to ensure the safety of the population, the Night Watch Department is going to open a new set of candidates for patrolling the streets at night. In the 99th year of the Cataclysm, a place for safe living was finally created. Others continue to retreat. They hope that they will be able to win. Zhang Yu popped a waffle roll into his mouth and thought that he should take a good look around before returning. He took a few steps and noticed that his shoelaces had come undone. He tied his shoelaces and finished his waffle roll. He wanted to chew it, but stopped when he saw that something strange was going on around him. He heard snatches of conversation among passers-by, which soon disappeared. Everything around was filled with a dark green haze. He found himself completely alone in the middle of a dark street. He stood up on his feet and was horrified. His eyes reflected his own shadow, which was quickly approaching him. He began to look around in horror and saw a completely different world in front of him. Footsteps were heard behind him, and he saw the girl run past him and pounce on the monster. Zhang Yu turned around and saw people fighting monsters. There was a red stripe above all of them. He opened his mouth in surprise and thought that it looked like there was big trouble here. He looked at the sun, which had 4 stripes above it, and thought that he might start to panic. Small drops of water slowly fell down. The drops fell on the buildings, but continued on their way. Several drops separated and ended up directly above Zhang Yu's head. Drops fell on his forehead, and the whole world again acquired bright colors. He stood in the middle of the road on a busy street. People were going about their business. Merchants were advertising their goods. Among this crowd, one man helped the grandfather cross the road and told him to watch his step and be careful. In the 99th year of the Cataclysm, the Night Patrol Unit remains a reliable support for the civilian population. Their world becomes better and their cities safer. A little girl walked next to Zhang Yu and pointed her finger at him and asked her mother, "Why is this stupid uncle standing?" The merchant pestered a passerby and asked if he would like to buy something. He has 50,000 bottles. He will give it away for just 5,000. Zhang Yu walked further down the street and wondered, is their city really safe? Or is it all an elaborate lie? The merchant suddenly put his hand on his shoulder and asked if he would like to buy medicine. Zhang Yu was surprised, and the merchant said that the medicines were the same as the official ones. Zhang Yu covered his nose so as not to smell the fumes from the merchant and asked, does he sell medicine? The city is full of monsters, and he sells it. Does he imagine himself to be the god of medicine? The merchant showed him an assortment of medicines and said that this was not true, but he had everything he needed. Zhang Yu asked, is it free? The merchant turned around and said that if he doesn't want it, then he shouldn't buy it. And where do monsters come from here? Zhang Yu approached him and said that he was just joking. His eyes lit up and he asked, does he have divine oil? The sun began to set below the horizon. Zhang Yu was riding on the bus and thought that a bottle of divine oil costs 3,000. Didn't he take too much money from him? Then let him not blame him if he reports him to the police. He looked out the window and thought that this was an ordinary street. Yesterday, he was too suspicious of everything. The bus pulled up to the stop and warned passengers about it. The bus stopped and the world before Zhang Yu's eyes became gloomy again. He saw his reflection in the window and got scared. A second later, everything became the same again. He started looking around and thought, did this happen again? This is the second time this has happened. The bus pulled away from the stop, and he thought that he would need to look around on the way home. Dusk came and Jong-yu reached his apartment. He went into the shower and bathed. He shook his head and droplets of water fell from his hair. He went to the mirror and was very surprised by the pattern on his chest. He touched the pattern with his hand and thought that it seemed like he had already seen something like this somewhere. Is it because that book fell on him? One night, he was rummaging through the bookshelf and looking for a comic. A book with the same pattern as on his chest fell on his head, and after this book, several more fell. The pattern on his chest lit up, and he clenched in pain. He sank to the floor and said it hurt so much. Everything seems to be on fire. He took the shower head and directed a cool stream of water onto his chest. He sighed and felt better. He stood under the cold water for a few more seconds, and the pattern stopped burning. He went to the mirror and saw a red line above him that showed 100%. He chuckled nervously and said, "So that's it." His shadow began to move and a second later disappeared. He looked down and was very surprised when he did not see a shadow under him. He began to panic and began to rush around the bathroom in search of his shadow. He saw his shadow on the wall and sighed with relief. He said that he thought it had already disappeared. So many strange things have happened, he thinks that he would not even be surprised at the disappearance of the shadow. He came to the door and said how tired he was. He reached out to the door handle and pulled the door open. His revived shadow was waiting for him outside the door. Jong-yu stood still for a few seconds and looked at the shadow. He looked at the shadow again and took a step towards it. He said that he would have fun. He already realized that something amazing was coming. His heart suddenly ached and he clutched his chest with his hand. Good news, his shadow is not gone. Bad news, it's alive. The red bar above Jong-yu still showed 100%, and his shadow stood opposite and looked at him. Night has come. There was a shadow in one of the rooms, and Jong-yu ordered it to raise its left hand. The shadow raised its left hand, and Jong-yu said, "Let it raise its right leg." The shadow raised its right leg and found itself in a strange position. Jong-yu laughed sarcastically, and the shadow tensed at the sight of his expression. Jong-yu grinned and ordered the shadow to dance, after which the shadow began to dance and clap its hands. Jong-yu thought that his head was just buzzing. Where did this even come from? He put his hand to his chest, and a blue sphere appeared under his palm, which at the same moment flew into the air. Hieroglyphs were depicted on the sphere, and it began to unwind. The sphere began to slow down and stopped at one hieroglyph. A system window with the characteristics of his shadow appeared in front of Jong-yu. He was surprised. These are the characteristics of his shadow. He pressed the button and the details came up. His shadow exists only thanks to him. It has the same memories and strength. It can perform the simplest tasks. But he needs to pay attention to the fact that the shadow does not have consciousness. Perhaps this can be changed in the future. He looked at the dancing shadow and asked, since it doesn't have consciousness, then it can't speak either. He stuck his hand through the shadow, and it didn't react at all. He asked the shadow, does it have all his memories? The shadow nodded, and Jong-yu quickly rushed to his desk and began to throw out sheets of paper. He took out his homework, which had a math example, and told the shadow that this was his assignment for the summer, and he asked the shadow to look at it. He extended a pen to the shadow and asked, can it hold the pen? The shadow took the pen and sat down at the table. Jong-yu stood behind the shadow and started pointing his finger at it. She thought, does this guy have some other essence? He's just shocked. The shadow put the pen on the table and turned to Jong-yu. He asked why it didn't write anything. The shadow wrote on the paper that it solved the mathematical problem. Jong-yu tried to hit the shadow and said that this one has all his memories, but he could solve this equation in 2 minutes. He wondered if this task was too difficult. He told the shadow to draw a horse, and the shadow quickly took the pen in his hands and began to draw. Jong-yu was surprised by the speed of the shadow and thought that with this, he could even write books and make money from it, and it is quite good at this. He opened the characteristics window and wanted to look at other possibilities of the shadow. He pressed the button and a detailed description of the shadow's abilities appeared. With the help of a shadow bite, he can take away shadow points from others, he can absorb shadows and strengthen himself and his shadow. He thought, absorbing the shadow, what does this mean? Do you need to come into contact with the object from which the shadow comes? He looked around in search of an object that cast a shadow and approached a dark corner. He extended his hands forward and began to try the absorption. His hand shook, but nothing changed. Jong-yu smiled nervously and thought that this skill didn't even have a manual. The description of the shadow pupil skill states that there has been a change in his eyes. If he activates this ability, then the dark side of this world will open before him. She wondered, is the dark side of the world the strange place that he happened to see earlier? He decided to take another look at it and looked at his palm. He told the shadow to stop and do a few push-ups while he looked at it. The shadow looked in his direction, stood up from the chair, and began to merge with the floor. The shadow disappeared and Jong-yu asked where it was going. He told this one to do push-ups. He shouted, "Where is his shadow?" It was already deep night outside, and Zhang Yu was still looking for his shadow. He looked around and told the shadow to come out. A dark cloud of smoke appeared in front of him, and a shadow came out of there. Zhang Yu asked, "Did it just escape?" The shadow wrote on a piece of paper that it was on the dark side. Zhang Yu asked, "What was it doing there?" The shadow tore out a piece of paper and wrote that it was doing push-ups there. Zhang Yu wondered, perhaps shadow training is better on the dark side of the world. He told the shadow to continue. It nodded and disappeared under the floor. He sighed and sat down at the table. He took the pen and said that now it was time for him to get down to business. Morning has come. Zhang Yu's quiet snoring could be heard throughout the apartment. He sat at the table and drooled in his sleep. He began to talk in his sleep and dreamed about his mother's friends, his fitness trainer, his classmate Xiaozhu, how passionate they were. Let them slow down and give him a pen, and then he will draw for them. He giggled and the alarm rang. He warmed up and thought that he was so tired from this position. Someone knocked on his door and loudly asked him to open the door. He came to the door and said that there was no need to shout so much because it was morning. He opened the door and saw Lu Yayao, who was his childhood sweetheart, standing in front of him. She was constantly acting hot-tempered. He was surprised when he saw her streak of blood and wondered why she was bleeding less. He needs to think. After some thought, he realized that she was having those same days. She came into his apartment and he asked why she came so early. Without looking up from the phone, she told him to hurry up and asked what he was doing yesterday. He was talking about some matter, but she didn't really understand anything. Let him tell her in more detail. There was a roar behind her and she got scared. She screamed that if he didn't want to talk, then he would have said so. Why bother slamming the door? Zhang Yu remained silent and saw the cracks on the wall and was surprised at his strength. Lu Yayao called out to him. She finally looked up from the phone and looked at Zhang Yu. She looked first at his back, then at his toned chest and asked, has he pumped up his muscles? She said that this could not be. He would rather die than start playing sports. How did he get such muscles overnight? She pointed her finger at his shoulder and asked, did he do something? He looked at her finger and said that he had only done a few exercises. He thought that it seemed like the results of the shadow exercises were showing on him. Lu Yayao suddenly lifted his t-shirt and Zhang Yu was surprised. He blushed and she looked at his body and said that he was a deceiver. It is impossible to pump up that many abs in just a few exercises. She said that she saw how her father did some business. She looked up at him and said that it was not too late for him to stop. Zhang Yu asked her to shut up and said that he does not do anything like that. She grabbed his hand sharply and he exclaimed, what is she doing? Is she going to kill him? She took a bracelet from her pocket and put it on Zhang Yu's hand. He asked, what is this? She told him not to move and replied that it was a pollution index device. He repeated, pollution index. She replied that murders, foreign objects, and insults are all part of the defilements. If everything is not eliminated in time, the accumulation of pollution threatens the degeneration and alienation of people. Zhang Yu chuckled and thought that his ability came from the manual on his chest. Would it be useful? A dark glowing sphere appeared on his chest, and the numbers on the pollution index began to increase. He thought, what kind of reaction is this? He saw that she took out a gun and thought, did she really want to shoot him? You can't let Lu Yayao find out about everything. He needs to prevent this. He focused, and the numbers on the pollution index began to decrease. She twirled the gun in her hand and said that it looked like there was nothing like that. Zhang Yu said that he said that and asked, was she going to shoot him? He relaxed and exhaled. She said that her father taught her to be careful in everything. Zhang Yu abruptly changed the subject and said that he had recently drawn some drawings and asked if she wanted to take a look at it. She happily agreed and asked him to show it to her quickly. He asked her to hold something, otherwise it might leak. She agreed and asked him to be quick. She couldn't wait any longer. After she left, he lay down on the bed and breathed out a sigh of relief. He said it was close. Luckily, he managed to fool her. He opened the system window and started reading the system log. His shadow has gone to the dark side and continues his training. The launch of the shadow bite was activated. His shadow became many times stronger. The system log says that arm strength was during training and 2 units were added to this. When the shadow bite was launched, 2 shadow points were added. Zhang Yu introduced the shadow's training and shouted in surprise, the shadow has been training all night. Shadows began to wrap around Yu's body, and at that moment his shadow gradually grew from the wooden floor. Yu says great. He had already felt the results of yesterday's training of this shadow. But push-ups alone are not enough, so he decided to suggest increasing the difficulty. He crossed his arms and looked at the shadow with a smirk. The shadow's eyes glowed with a bright light, but the shadow answered in agreement, after which Yu shouted, okay, lying emphasis plank. Yu stood aside and watched as the shadow carried out his every order and necessary movement. He adds, now 1 arm stand on the index finger, mixed support, handstand, prone support, he loudly and joyfully says, once again, lying down, and asks the shadow to pretend as if it is raising a banner. Shadow fulfills every requirement of its owner. You orders again, gun position, need to increase the difficulty, and he orders the shadow to crawl, sit in an L shape, raise his legs and pump his abs. These exclamations are heard by Yao through the door, being outside. She stopped at the door and thought, it looks like he really is training. Maybe she was making things up too much. And now she can be calm, everything is fine with him. And after these thoughts, she decided to go read comics at home. The Cataclysm is already 99 years old, now January 20, the first day since the shadow appeared. After shadow training, he does not experience any pain, but becomes stronger. This completely satisfies him. He will be content with this. January 21, the second day, Yuda's shadow has a lot more exercise. The result is obvious. Now he should be able to defeat Lu Yao with one blow, right? Although no, he still needs to try harder. Uncle Lai came today. He works on the night watch, so we can't let him suspect anything. Uncle says, hey kid, why is he opening so slowly? It was an adult, pumped up man. Uncle Lai is getting old. He is left without an arm. Yu thinks that now he can deal with 3 Uncle Lis and Lu Yao with just 1 blow. January 23, Yu thinks he needs to work harder. It's terrible, you can't continue to live like this. To gain abilities, he also needs to try. He must train endurance. On January 24, he does something on his phone while the shadow trains for him in his room. He likes that the shadow is busy. January 25, nothing has changed, the shadow is training, and he likes it. On January 26th, she was still doing a lot of exercises and training, while Yu was lying on the floor in a sweat. Great, today he decided to do 10 push-ups, he needs to try to do it. Yu looked at his characteristics and thought, strange, the speed of gaining shadow points is very slow, only 8 have accumulated. Shadow attribute, shadow points 8, human 10 points, shadow bite abilities, shadow pupil. Based on his current progress, it will be difficult for him to reach 10 points for evolution. He stood in the middle of the room, looked down and wondered if he could increase the height of this thing if he walked into the dark world. And suddenly shadow sparks began to curl around his feet, and after a while he began to dissolve into it and eventually disappeared into the floor. He was floating in some kind of space, as a result of which he found himself in a dark world. He looked around and thought, is this the dark world? It looks exactly like his room. He left the building and found himself among high-rise buildings. Yu looked into the sky and said, it worked. He shielded his eyes from the light and examined the nearby territory. He was annoyed that he could barely get out of the room. You can only get to the dark side by leaving the real world. He rubbed his forehead and said, by the way, everything here is exactly the same as in his world, only darker. He walked further down the street and suddenly heard some strange and creepy sound. He asked, what? Is this a shadow? Did you come to meet him? Then he looked around and saw in front of him a huge monster with an ominous look, which showed its sharp fangs. The monster rose above him and looked into his eyes, which really scared Yu. He started screaming, what a horror, and at that time the monster tried to attack him with magical powers. Yu was able to dodge the blow and ran in an unknown direction. The monster looked at him and began to continue the attack. Yui screamed in horror and fear, what horror, disgusting, and he tried to dodge again and again. He raised his hand and said, shadow pupil activation. He put his hands in a certain position and tried to penetrate the resulting magical window. Diving straight there, after a while he landed in the city with a crash and pitiful screams. After landing, he looked around, sighed and said that it was dangerous. His pants were torn and he had bruises. He sat up and wondered, he was scared to death. So what was it? He put his hand to his heart and said again where it came from and why it attacked him. He examined parts of the body where clothes were torn and bloody wounds appeared. Yu thought about it. Fortunately, the exercises made him much more mobile and the monster could not harm him. And he grabbed the iron pipes from the chair and said angrily, some stinky guy dared to block his entrance. He can't leave it like that. He picked up the given folding chair and placed it on his shoulder. On January 28, he fought the entity for the first time, but unfortunately, he lost. On January 29, at the rematch, he failed again, received a strong blow to the chest and almost broke his bones. He screamed at the monster to let it die and get what it deserves. On January 30, 3 bloody marks appeared on his buttocks. Although the past few days have not been easy, he still managed to recover 6% of the blood. He screamed in pain. On January 31, Yu decided to regain his strength at home. Lu Yao helped him heal his wounds and process it. While she was soaking up the alcohol in the cotton wool, she asked him if he had gotten into fights a lot in the last few days, right? He replied that she would not understand this, scars adorn men. She grinned and asked him again, scars? On the butt. But suddenly he screamed that he was in pain. She replied that since he was in pain now, it meant that his body would get stronger very soon and looked at him with a sad look, embarrassed. He turned around, a tear was rolling down his face from the past exclamations, and he asked her, by the way, there is only a month left, what are the plans? She looked into his eyes and asked, a month until what? He lay down more comfortably on the sofa and answered, before the exam, of course. She didn't forget, did she? She sat on the sofa and looked at him. During the years of disaster, most industries became less popular, including the cultural and arts industries. And people involved in art became the bottom of society. Nobody cares about entertainment and celebrations anymore. Nowadays, battles come first and occupy first place in people's hearts. To become part of the Night Watch, you need to pass a martial arts exam established at the state level. Once you pass the exam, your life changes dramatically. So they sat on the couch and talked. Yu put his hand on her hand and noticed something was wrong. She replied that in fact she did not want to participate in this. He asked what? She continued to clean the wounds on his arm. After which she pursed her lips, hesitated a little to continue her thoughts, and after a while answered that she wanted to study music. He looked at her in bewilderment and said that if she wants to study, then let her do it. The only thing is that her father might be against it. You thought, after all, Uncle Lu is a high-ranking person in the Night Watch, and she is comparable to a second-generation official who failed his exams and became a freelancer. She put a drop of cleanser on his wound and said that he would not agree, which made her feel upset while talking about it. You asked again, and then what? She asked not to tell anyone. The policy changed, and she filled his remaining wounds with a special remedy. She then added that anyone can apply to take the martial arts exam. He was surprised and asked what? Didn't she respect her principles before? She'll definitely pass it. To which she replied that the pressure on the Night Watch is constantly increasing, so almost everyone is taken there. She thinks that she will definitely get through this, took air into her mouth and blew on the healing wound. He put his hand to his chin and said, this is it. But what immediately appeared in his thoughts was the fact that Lu Yayao had very strong abilities. On the day of the exam, a lot of different devices are used. If there are pistols, he will definitely fail. And he imagined how armed people were shooting at him from head to toe and shouting to him, gotcha. He put his hand to his chest and thought, he won't be sent to some kind of correctional camp. After these thoughts, he came up with something, looked at Yayao affectionately and asked, by the way, can he use her detector? She was surprised and asked again, and why? He knows that this device can only be used to detect others. If he encounters one of these, then the best thing to do is either run away or call 911 before he gets killed by the special one. He asked again, special? She answered yes. You looked at her in bewilderment and thought about something. She said that they had sorted out his problems and added that she would probably return. You cleared his throat and said, he thinks that her family knows a lot about the others, right? She replied, since he is so interested in special people, it turns out he is still planning to take the exam. You grinned and said, she said that this year they will definitely take the martial arts exam, if only he had the ability. She looked at him quickly and asked loudly, really? Suddenly. He was afraid of her reaction and stammered, of course, especially since he is also planning to create several comics about others and special ones. Yayao approached him sharply and asked loudly, is this true? And she asked him to talk about it. He didn't know what to answer, and in his mind he said it at random. The original idea was a skinny guy named Abin who was constantly bullied on campus, but didn't hold a grudge as he had a kind heart. Thanks to a kind teacher and aunt, he was selected by the Night Watch unit to participate in the Super Soldier Project. Abin possessed amazing willpower, transformed beyond recognition, and received a super soldier injection and became a powerful captain. The Night Watch division did not plan to send him to the battlefield, sending him to various kinds of events so that he could meet people from high society. And everything was like this until powerful others invaded the city. When he talked about this, Yayao listened to him with great interest and was impressed. After their heartfelt conversation, they entered a room. Yayao opened the door to her room and invited Yu. He walked in and looked back in surprise. It was Zhang Yu's house, on the same floor as Lu Yayao's apartment. She told Yu to sit here while she went to Daddy's room. Her room was set up in an interesting way. You noticed a teddy bear in front of her, some writing on the walls, women's items, accessories, appliances, a lamp, plants, and a lot of furniture. He noticed something on the table and asked what. It was a book called Fateful Emptiness, on the cover of which there was a girl in the arms of a young man. He asked, Fateful Simplicity? A comic book about brother and sister love. Does she like this? He grabbed the book, opened it in the center, and began to read. Yayao got angry, took the book and shouted that her friend left it. She didn't read it. She walked to the door, turned around, and told Yu to sit here and not touch her things. He looked after her, had already opened some box in which he was sorting through things, and told her to go. Looking at her, he thought, she is still the same. She doesn't know how to defend herself at all, by the way. She has liked music since childhood, and he looked at the guitar standing near her bookshelves. She used to constantly pester him to listen to music with her, although he is not particularly fond of this activity. He pressed the button on the tape recorder. There were a lot of tapes around it. He turned on the music and started listening to it. Suddenly, childhood memories surfaced before him, how he helped carry something to Yao, how he told her scary stories in the dark about ghosts, and she screamed in fear that he scared her to death. Yao returned and interrupted his enjoyment, asking when did he start liking music. He came to his senses, rubbed his eyes, and asked what. She came closer to him, pointed her finger at him, and said that he used to hate it, after which she threw an object into his hands. He asked, "Did you find it?" To which she replied that everything was here and offered to look. He put this object to his eyes, put it on his head, and fell into some unknown abyss. His eyes were tired. Finding himself in another reality, he is surprised. Wow, is this Shenju? What an impressive virtual reality experience. Shenju, an unexplored space full of unknowns, is considered the first source of the cataclysm. Others appeared here, committed brutal murders, destroyed and gradually consumed the world. What kind of monsters are these? Could it be the ones he saw that day in the hospital? Between his world and Shenju's world, there is a space called the Dark World, displaying a projection of the real world. As soon as the space was opened, the monsters immediately entered the world through the dark. And although the Night Watch continues to monitor the breaches, sometimes others still fall to them. The shadow layer is reset every 3 months, redisplaying the current picture of the world. And during this period, others penetrate their world. However, given that the layer of shadows significantly weakens the world's defenses, people with a rank below 4th should not go out. The visibility range of the shadow layer is 3-5 meters, but with increasing human strength, the field of view expands. There are a lot of different kinds of pollution in the shadow layer. If people stay in this for a long period of time, it is quite possible that things will become different. Is there dirt in the shadow layer? It's strange, he didn't feel any discomfort when he came here earlier. Finding himself in this reality, everything around is illuminated with a blue light. Yu finds himself opposite a huge monster, and after he notices this, he stops and stands in a stupor. A bright beam of light emanates from the monster standing in front of him, and the monster makes loud sounds. Yu takes a defensive position and thinks about how to cope with the monsters. You need to be able to fully control your powers. There's a chance to become special. And suddenly, a faceless creature with red eyes and a naked body appears. Yu looks at the resulting monster and says, "Cool, is this what is special? Looks amazing." Yu stands in front of him and wonders if he passes the exam, will he also be able to become special? But if you think about it, someone with a human body is special. This controls his power, but at the same time he dies because of this. Special people are constantly fighting against pollution and alienation. And after death, there is a high probability of becoming different. Therefore, special people, when they realize that death will soon come for them, try with all their might to use up the remnants of their strength. A huge monster appears in front of you, and the space around is filled with bright light. Yu looks at this and shouts, "Wow." He takes those data glasses off his head in bewilderment. Yao notices this and looks at him questioningly, and after a while she asks, "So what?" He rubbed his forehead, looked at her, and replied, "Nothing, too much information, it takes time to digest it." By the way, could she stretch it? Yao did not like this statement, and she asked again with anger and temper, "What?" Let him repeat it. He offered her 3 original paintings. She can decide for herself about the content. After these words, she answered calmly, hand in hand. And she began to knead his back. She asked, "What's the problem?" He replied that he trains constantly, and that's why his neck gets stiff. Yao asked, "Does he also work out his abs?" He replied, "Of course, does she want to touch?" She lifted his t-shirt and began to touch his abs. They were both smiling, but at that moment Uncle Lu entered the room. He looked at what was happening in rage and clenched his hand into a fist. After some time, they sat in the kitchen and ate food at the table. Yu ate with Chinese chopsticks. Uncle Lu looked at him with rage, which made Yu nervous and worried. Yao said, "Dad, he misunderstood everything." He replied, "Did you get it wrong? Did his own eyes deceive him?" Yao smiled and said no, but I had nothing to add, and she shouted, "Zhang, let him say something." Yu had nothing to say, so he replied, "Uncle Lu, he will prescribe 3 glasses as punishment." He grabbed a glass of liquid, began to drink, and added that he could. Uncle Lu and Yao opened their mouths in surprise. Uncle Lu asked, "Does this mean there are reasons?" But before he could finish speaking, he started shouting, "Boy, he's become too impudent, where's his knife?" Yao got scared and started holding her dad and asking him to calm down. Yu jumped up and started running, shouting, "Uncle Lu, he got it all wrong." She and Lu Yao are childhood friends, but their personalities are completely different. He is a bully boy, while Lu Yao is a diligent daughter. He doesn't know why, but Lu Yao has liked playing with him since childhood. He asked her as a child, when he relieved himself, maybe she would stay away from him. To which she replied, who would think of being afraid of him? Maybe it's all because he once helped her deal with the healthy guys. Besides, she might have been attracted by his bravery and beauty. She cried in embarrassment, saying Xiao Zhangyu while he was fighting with someone to protect her. She accompanied him even when he pretended to be a tramp and stood next to him with a cardboard that said help the children while he held a plate for money in his hand. For this, her father convinced her that she should not play with him and scolded Yu, calling him a young deceiver. Uncle Lu never allowed his daughter to get too close to him, constantly warning him by looking straight at him and lighting a cigarette to smoke. Yao, looking at what was happening, took the cigarette from his hands. He asked what they were doing when he returned, and he looked furiously at Yu. He replied that they were looking at information about others and special ones. Uncle Lu looked at them and said, "That's it, Xiao Zhangyu. He knows why the government doesn't let students know about all this in advance." Yu replied that he didn't quite understand that. Uncle Lu replied that everyone has different hearts. In some, evil begins to prevail over kindness. Despair can attract people from Shenyu. And everyone shouldn't know about certain things. Not everyone has the willpower. If a gap is formed in the heart, someone else can penetrate it at any moment. Therefore, various tests are carried out before the exam, and only people who are physically prepared can come into contact with the world of others. But this world is very dangerous. It's a shame that even with today's medical abilities, people still get out of control. He hopes he understood everything? You answered, of course, Uncle Lu. But he can't miss this year's martial arts exam. Besides, he figured it out a long time ago, so there's nothing to worry about. Uncle Lu, lighting a cigarette and clenching his hand into a fist, said, "Xiao Zhangyu." But before he could finish what he wanted to tell him, he received a call on his phone. Someone reported, "Commander Lu, there is an urgent mission regarding the Shadow Lair." He replied that he understood everything and was already moving out. He stood up, went to the exit and said that he was leaving, and turning to Zhangyu, he told him better not to upset him, and then he would take him to the night watch unit. Yu was delighted with these words and told Uncle Lu not to worry. He and Lu Yayao would not do anything like that. Lu Yayao choked on the conversation, then grabbed him and shouted, "What's the matter? They've never done anything like me before." Did he say that on purpose? Blessing. There is a crowd of people in the center of the city. Everyone is talking to each other. Conversations can be heard all around. It's cold today. Is he not frozen? Will he come today? Hawthorn berries and sugar. Hawthorn berries. Someone will be there in a few minutes. The child sitting on his father's neck ate candy with great pleasure. The night watch works for their good. Yu looks at this banner and thinks that he wanted to learn more information, but in the end, there was only basic knowledge. He walks through the supermarket and puts the necessary products into the basket. He thought, judging by Uncle Lu's reaction, these materials will be hidden. He is afraid he won't see it again. Suddenly, he cleared his throat and heard a sound. It was a call from Lu Yayao. She asked Zhangyu to take a carton of eggs, a carton of milk, and something else. But no, that's it. Let him forget, that's all. Yu thought that she wanted to ask him to take 2 packs of pads, but she was too shy and he went to the stand with pads. He took several packages and thought, there is a month left before graduation. Now the effect of shadow training is gradually weakening. He was walking home along the street with a large bag of groceries. The sky was bright pink, and there were many beautiful trees all around. He thought, it seems that shadow training alone is not enough. It is necessary to add real ones. He continued to walk down the street and remembered, by the way, recently the propaganda about fighting others has increased, and more people have signed up for the martial arts exam. He looked at the sky and had a feeling as if something terrible was about to happen, but he decided, okay, he was imagining too much. He needed to warm up. He raised his left hand and began to make circular movements with it, while in his right hand he was holding a package, but suddenly he stopped. Rays from the shadow appeared around him, and he was plunged into the other world. The figures were 14%. He clenched his hand into a fist and shouted, "Who?" A sound was heard all around and some attacked and bloody men came out in his direction, who stopped and looked into his eyes. "You spoke in fear. It seems they live in the same building. Why is he here?" The man did not answer and fell right in front of him. He didn't understand what happened. His eyes became glassy, and a monster appeared behind this man, whose indicators were 24%. Children were sitting nearby, hugging each other. They were a boy and a girl. You saw them, and this monster had already appeared in front of him. You asked loudly, "Is this?" The guy, who was wearing special clothes, was walking down the street and reasoning. He was terribly tired. Lately, more and more work had been falling on the night watch. When he was a civilian, he thought that this work was held in high esteem, but as a result, he works overtime all the time. If he had known this before, he would not have passed the exam. Suddenly, he heard someone's cries for help. These were the cries of a child who was being swallowed up by darkness. He was screaming, "Save, help." He was not alone. There was another girl with him, who also screamed in fear. The guy understood, this is different. This creature decided to drag people into the dark world. No, someone else sneaked into their world to harm. He had never seen people so publicly drawn to the dark side. The children were still screaming for help. They were being pulled into the other world. After his thoughts, the man began to run and shout so that they should not be afraid because he would help. He extended his hands to them and managed to grab them, but they all ended up in the other world, which frightened even the rescuer. They landed in the other world. The child asked where they were. The girl screamed and cried for her mother. The man stood up and said, "It's over." He was sucked in too. He's already a civilian. Already finished my shift. He doesn't even have any weapons on him. Will he really meet his death here? He grabbed his head and couldn't get rid of these thoughts. A red light appeared in front of them and a huge monster began to attack them. The guy tried to attack it and dodge the attacks of this monster. The children looked at what was happening in surprise, holding hands. The guy realized that the gap had disappeared, which meant that he would not be able to return. He looked around and realized that there were others everywhere who could attack at any moment. Besides, he communicated almost all the time with citizens. He had already lost all his fighting skills, and what was most terrible were the helpless children who stood on the sidelines crying about how they want to see their mother. He said, "How terrible. He can only send a distress signal and wait for rescue." He pressed a button on his watch and told the children not to cry and to take a watch that would help temporarily counteract the pollution here. As soon as he comes up with something, he will immediately take them home. He thought that this bracelet would not help him much. At least he would give it to the children, and as for their survival, it all depends on fate. The children were happy, weren't they? Will brother take them home? He looked at them sadly and replied, "Yes, that's why they should be close. He will deal with a small problem and everything will be over." Suddenly, a huge monster with furious red eyes and huge sharp fangs appeared in front of him. When he was 18, he passed the martial arts exam and entered the department's university's martial arts department. From the very beginning, he worked hard, laid a solid foundation, waited until he became a full-fledged fighter. In his second year of study, he took first place in the exam for fighting with others. But this turned out to be not enough. In other worlds, diligence is far from the first place. He did not believe in fate, but no matter how hard he tried, he still could not overcome the barrier and step over his limit. In the end, all he had to do was move from the martial arts department to the humanitarian department, becoming an ordinary civilian employee of the Night Watch. He stopped, bandaged his hands to prepare for a fight, and suddenly heard the monster approaching. The form is half human, moves on all fours. Because of this, he concluded that the monster is of an average level. The monster opened its mouth and screamed loudly at him. The man clenched his hand into a fist and prepared to attack. The man jumped up and tried to attack the monster with his fist in the jaw. He tried to jump as high as possible, but the monster only opened its mouth more and more and looked at the man. He sighed and said, "Great." The familiar feeling returns, but suddenly he looked to the side with a questioning look, as the monster immediately attacked him with his hand. But the guy landed on his feet and pushed the monster some distance, which was not expected. He thought, horror. After all, he wanted to return, but his body turned out to be slower than his mind. He miscalculated a little. The man looked at the monster with furious eyes and again rushed to attack. The monster began to attack the man in different parts of the body and in different directions, but the guy dodged the blows in all suitable ways as best he could. He sighed and thought, the body is becoming heavier. It seems as if numerous needles are piercing the body. He tries to move quickly around the monster, but realizes that he can no longer run. Something needs to be done. He clenches his hands into fists, swings one arm, and directs his powers at the monster. The guy uses the power of the shadow blinding. This attack knocked the monster to the ground. The guy realizes that his pollution level is growing. Every time he uses his skills, his pollution increases. Unskilled people like him cannot use these abilities repeatedly, but fortunately, since he became a civilian, he did not use the abilities very often, so his pollution was at a low level. But if he doesn't take the risk now, he may not have a future. The guy is about to attack, but the monster hits him faster and pushes him several meters away. The guy coughs up blood and thinks that this monster has adapted to his skills very quickly. A martial arts student with only an average level will be able to deal with it in no time, but it will be difficult for him. Is it really because of the difference in talents? He will not be able to win, but he must not retreat. The only thing he can do is stall for time and wait until the other members of the Night Watch arrive. The monster pierces the guy's shoulder and pins him to the ground. The guy thinks, is he really dying? When he was 15 years old, his entire family was killed by others. That is why at 18 he decided to take a test in martial arts, and at 20 he was expelled from his second year. At 21, he joined the Night Watch unit as a civilian. 4 years have passed since then. This is his life. It, of course, may not seem easy, but for this world, it is considered the norm. In all these years of struggle between people and others, they have never lived in peace, but sometimes even others retreat. However, once the clouds cover the sun, people no longer see hope. Death is the norm in this world, but before he dies, he must do at least something. The guy gets up and thinks that so, his second round against this monster begins. The monster attacks the guy, but he manages to dodge and kick the monster's head and is pushed back. The guy transfers energy into his fists and delivers many blows throughout the monster's body. The guy thinks he needs to hit even harder. The guy's consciousness is clouded, and he can hardly see the monster in front of him, but he thinks that he needs to make more efforts. The guy's body barely moves anymore, and the monster uses this to strike him. From this attack, the guy flies a long distance, and upon landing, he thinks that he can no longer see anything. After all, his skills were not enough. Even with the help of pills, he couldn't do it. He's very weak. This is the end of his usual boring life. Losing consciousness, the guy sees Jongyu, who asks what is going on here. The guy thinks, is this really a man from the Night Watch? This is not true because his voice is too young, and besides, his manner of speech is not at all the same. Is he really special? This also can't happen because special people don't come here. Jongyu helps the guy sit down, leaning his elbow on the wall, and says that he can rest and leave the rest to him. The guy thinks that in addition, the entrance and exit from the dark side is very well controlled. It is impossible for a random person to get here. He's not part of the mysterious forces that live on the dark side, is he? The monster hits Jongyu in the face, and he flies all over the street from the force of the blow. The guy thinks he is very weak. The monster is about to strike the guy, but Jongyu hits the monster's face with his palm. Jongyu, pointing a bottle of soy sauce at the monster, tells this parasite that his opponent is not this guy, but him. The monster attacks, but Jongyu dodges and breaks the bottle on the monster. The monster raises his hand with a blade to attack, but at the moment of the blow, Jongyu is already behind him. Jongyu hits the monster with a broken bottle, and dodging each attack with a mockery, says that it is useless because he has already figured out the pattern of its attacks. The monster is seriously injured, so its speed and strength leave much to be desired. He has the advantage in this battle. Jongyu hits him multiple times with the bottle, and the monster screams in pain. The monster begins to retreat. The guy thinks, is he really mistaken in thinking that he is weak? Obviously, there are no rules in this battle, and this guy is inexplicably suppressing the enemy. Jongyu attacks the monster and says that he beat him up a few days ago, so it's time for them to switch places. Jongyu is surprised that the monster was able to anticipate his attack and struck faster. Jongyu crashes into the wall of a building and falls to the ground, saying that he acted carelessly and should not have attacked the same place. The monster is about to attack. Jongyu doesn't understand. What should he do? He couldn't let the monster attack those children. If he were alone, he could simply escape the dark side and return home to heal his wounds. But if he does that now, then they will die, and that is not part of his plans. The monster only has 20% of his blood left. Does he have any reason to be afraid? Today, he must finish the job. The guy, gathering his strength, says that the monster has a serious injury in his right rib. He must attack there. Jongyu rushed towards the monster with great speed and said that he understood him. The monster stopped, and Jongyu smiled, and realizing that the monster would protect the right side of the body, he struck from the left, reducing the monster's blood amount to 18%. The monster runs away, and this shocks Jongyu. The monster flies past the guy who says that he is wrong. The monster wants to get the blood of those two children. The monster, having reached the children, had already opened its mouth to eat them. Jongyu says he has to stop and throws the can at the monster's head with all his might. This helped buy a little time for the guy to gather his remaining strength and pounce on the monster and kick him in flight. With this attack, the guy reduced the monster's blood amount to 15%. He fell to the ground and began coughing up blood. The monster screams in pain and is about to eat the guy, but at the last second Jongyu was able to stop the monster. Jongyu says that this monster must die and bites into the monster's neck, which removes another 1% of the enemy's blood. Jongyu knocks the monster to the floor, and inflicting many attacks says that this other one is more like a dog with his barking. Jongyu, having reduced the monster's blood level to 11%, says that if he wants to taste a person, he must take a risk. Jongyu notices a bright red dot on the monster's back and strikes that spot. He stabs the monster and says it should be dead already. This attack caused a strong release of energy, and the monster was torn into pieces. Jongyu breathes heavily and gets to his feet. Some objects fly around him, and the environment is gradually destroyed. The guy is sitting next to two children. Jongyu straightens his hair and says that he has finally taken revenge. But immediately after that, he began to lose consciousness and his eyes closed. Jongyu falls to the ground and sees only his shadow on the floor. Sometime later, it turns out that this destroyed place, engulfed in fire, is a gathering place. But why has everything changed so much? Suddenly, Jongyu noticed a bunch of others around him, who began to reach out to him with their clawed hands. He does not understand what is happening, and he is sucked into some kind of funnel. The sun disappeared, the dark side enveloped the world, hope was lost. Someone dances at the feast, and someone screams in pain. Some fight silently and die. This is commonplace. Some understand everything, and some don't. Someone's voice asks him to wake up and asks if he is alive or not. Jong-yu cleared his throat and told the guy that he was alive. It looks like he was just having a dream. After killing someone else, the memories are cut off. He activated the shadow pupil on the other, and the guy asked him if he was okay. Why is he silent? This guy is in serious condition and has lost a lot of blood, but he can still stand, which is amazing. He only had 10% blood left. System blood volume standard. 70% of the blood volume is a minor injury, and 10% of the blood volume is on the verge of death. Before the disaster, the survival rate for this type of injury was between 28 and 37%. When a person has only 5% of his blood volume left, he can barely speak, and it's time for him to leave the last words. The guy put his hand on his shoulder and invited him to sit near the wall. They sat down, and the guy asked if he wasn't a member of the Night Watch. Jong-yu realized that the guy did not recognize him, although they live in the same house. It looks like he can't see well, so it's normal that he didn't recognize him. The guy says that this simply cannot be. The other was very strong, so he does not believe that Jong-yu is not a member of the Night Watch. Jong-yu doesn't understand what kind of communication this is because he just saved him. The guy shed a lonely tear and said that the people from the Night Watch are very strong. He laughed and said that Jong-yu is very strong. He hit someone else with soy sauce, and it was very smart. Jong-yu asked if he was okay. He is amazed by the people from the Night Watch because this guy can laugh even in this state. The guy asked what university he was studying at and what year he was in. Jong-yu was lucky that this guy didn't recognize him because he'd rather not tell the truth, so he said that he was a second-year student at Beidou. The guy said that in that case, Jong-yu is younger than him. What is his specialty? Humanities or martial arts? Jong-yu mentally begs him to stop asking questions because he is ruining everything. The guy assumes that Jong-yu is studying martial arts because he is too strong for the humanities. He asked if he had a cigarette. Jong-yu took out the long cookies from his pocket and divided them in half. At first he bought a lot of cookies, but during the battle everything broke. But the guy can take it if he wants. It turns out that this is the first time that Jong-yu kills someone else alone. He always admired those who are interested in martial arts and everything in that spirit, because it is very exciting. He, unlike Jong-yu, has a lower attack power qualification that is much weaker. He's just hopeless. Even farsightedness, which he thought would increase combat effectiveness, does not save him at all. Jong-yu thinks that he needs to talk as little as possible in order to save energy until help arrives. The guy says everything is fine, and he just wanted to talk to someone. It's not every day that a civilian gets the opportunity to fight another. But in any case, he is terribly weak. He started coughing and said that he couldn't even resist the wave of pollution. Jong-yu asked him if he regrets everything. Since he chose the field of humanities, how could a civilian fall to the dark side? The guy clenched his hand into a fist and said that it was his choice. He started shouting that he was a civilian, he went to work every day, chatted with girls, and worked on the Night Watch. Isn't this a good life? He himself transferred to this specialty because he was kicked out of martial arts. It would seem that everything is just fine with him, but he doesn't like anything. He started coughing again, and Jong-yu asked him to calm down, otherwise it would be difficult for him. The guy said that he had sent a signal for help a long time ago, so rescuers would arrive soon. Jong-yu felt relieved by these words and said that he had to go. The boy clutched a glowing bracelet in his hand. The guy asked Jong-yu not to walk around because he might bump into someone else. He thinks that his abilities are not yet enough to fight several others at once. He asked him to chat some more until the rescuers arrived. Jong-yu understands that he needs to leave. Mentally, he asks him to give him a break because he is already very tired of his chatter. He still stayed and continued to listen to the guy's stories about when he was very brave and cool and was not afraid of anything. The guy smiled and said that if Jong-yu goes to university again, then let him take something to Director Zhu from the specialty of extraordinary technology. It can be said that his teachings did not bring much results, and even someone of the first rank can be extremely strong. Jong-yu suggested that he take the notebook, or he himself would come later and tell these people everything. The guy sighed and said that he had been carrying everything inside himself for a long time and wanted to find someone with whom he could just chat. It would be nice to come to Beidou Academy again. Does Jong-yu have a couple more of these sweet sticks? Looks like this guy liked these cookies. The energy began to thicken on the street, and the guy said that the Night Watch had arrived. Jong-yu is happy about this news because now they can help this guy. He took his package and started to leave, and the guy asked him if he would go with him. Jong-yu will get there on his own, and the guy wished him a safe journey with a smile. Jong-yu thanked him and started to leave, and the guy felt really bad. Officers report that they found a member of the Night Watch and 2 children. They should check his vital signs. His blood is still at 10%. The employee looked at his colleague and shook his head negatively. Jang Yu noticed that this guy's blood level began to drop rapidly. But why is this happening? They could have helped him with current technologies. Jang Yu continued to teleport back and noticed that the staff saluted this guy. His blood count dropped to 0%, and he just smiled one last time, as if he had disappeared into thin air. Jang Yu asks them to wait, but he is still teleported back to the street. People don't understand what this guy does, and they think he's an actor. Through the system window, the man says that special people must remember that they cannot give up even at the last minute of their lives. If the special ones understand that the chances of survival are low, they should take the pill with all care and caution at their own risk. The risks after taking this pill are extremely high. The probability of death reaches 90%. After taking this drug, the chances of future life are significantly reduced. They must remember all the fallen, boldly move forward until all others are destroyed. They must monitor the earth and sky, patrol day and night, and think only about a happy future. They mortals have to observe and confront inexplicable things because they are the Night Watch. After a while, Jang Yu began to go up the elevator in bloody clothes and wondered if that guy really died. He was constantly making jokes while he was chatting. It turns out that he just wanted to find an interlocutor before his death. No flowers, no applause, he passed away quietly, just like an ordinary person. No matter how ordinary he is, Jang Yu will still never forget him. He was very tired and decided to go straight to bed after taking a shower. He saw in the reflection that he had 55% blood, but he could hardly walk. He thought that he had about 20% left. This guy had 10% blood, and Jang Yu thinks that he could still be helped. It seems that training only the body is not enough, because willpower is also very important. Suddenly someone's loud voice asked him eggs. Lu Yayao on the sofa said that he did not answer the phone and there was no one at home. Did he go straight to the chicken coop to get eggs? Jang Yu clutched his bloody clothes in his hands and said that the new year is coming. There are huge queues in stores where you can stand for half a day. And anyway, where did she get the keys to his house? Lu Yayao said that he doesn't cook, and I don't go and order either, so Uncle Lai asked her to take care of him. She ran up to him and asked what happened to him. Did he really get into a fight? Jang Yu said that it was late and she should go home, otherwise Uncle Lu would misunderstand everything again. She grabbed his arm and told him to turn around. He started to wave it off and said that he was very hungry and wanted a bun. Through the holes in his clothes, she saw wounds and abrasions. How did he get so hurt? Jang Yu became nervous and said that he forgot to buy eggs. They were ready to start fighting. On the way home, he was attacked and robbed, but then he caught up with the guy and beat him up, so she shouldn't feel sorry for him. When the police arrived, the attacker was difficult to recognize as even a human being. He thinks she can't even imagine how good his reaction is. A left uppercut, then a right, and then a combination of up and down punches. Even his own mother doesn't recognize him. Lu Yayao touched him and looked at his face. He realized that she would never believe such nonsense. She just asked, "Does it hurt?" Jang Yu said that he just wants to sleep. Lu Yayao said that they should tell Uncle Lai about everything, because it's not good to fight at night. Jang Yu started making excuses and said that this was not a fight. He was just standing up for himself. But she cannot be convinced. Jang Yu sat down on the floor and said that he was too weak and could no longer do it. Lu Yayao thinks he needs to go to the hospital. He told her not to worry because at home there was everything she needed and the medicine was better than in any hospital. Does he really think that she will give him medicine? He called her Dr. Lu and asked her to patch him up. After that, he started yelling that he was in a lot of pain. He asked her to give him medicine and not turn him into a mummy. Lu Yayao hit him on the shoulder and asked if he would do this again. He promises that this will not happen again, but he will not swear. She began to threaten him with her fist, and he began to make excuses that this is inherent in them by nature, and they cannot live without fights. He will simply look at everything from the outside and will no longer get into fights. In this case, Lu Yayao leaves. Jang Yu invited her to stay with him for the night because he has a big bed. She stuck her tongue out at him and closed the door. Jang Yu began to rest and remembered that the guy asked him to send a message to Beidou. He got up from the couch and realized that this guy didn't even say his name. The system notifies that the monster's name is Wandering Spirit. View Shadow, Dark Beginning. Level Average. Description: another from the lower abyss, belongs to the shadow and the dark principle. If a person becomes the target of this monster, they will turn hidden attacks against the person, so you should watch your back. It is worth paying attention to the fact that this subspecies is not so easy to defeat. The price of murder is a broken arm. Jang received an insidious blow, shadow points, and more. Jang wonders if the first one he killed will be displayed somewhere. Or will he be consumed by the shadow's bite before the kill registers? The system notifies that an insidious strike is a hidden attack from the shadows that the enemy cannot see. The first attack causes colossal damage. Zhang says that first he should look at the skill he acquired. He stands in the middle of the room and says the name of the skill, but nothing happens. Zhang asks if nothing is happening because the system has messed up something. Or maybe it's because he doesn't have a target to attack. It doesn't matter, and he'll try next time. He looked at his stats window. His name is Zhang Yu. His attribute is Shadow. The number of shadow points is 14. He is a human, a stalker. His abilities are Teenia Bite, Shadow Pupil, Shadow Shape. The Stalker class allows you to kill from the shadows. He is a natural killer, so he feels at home and can sneak around in the shadows. Zhang asks why they can't write in simple language. Why does it work only in the dark? What should he do in the light? The system notifies that his shadow has undergone drastic changes. Now he can fully control the shadow and merge with it. Zhang wonders if he has a new skill, Shadow Form. The system notifies you that the Shadow Form section contains the following characteristics. First, if he trains in this state, he will notice significant changes. Second, his breath will be able to blend perfectly with the shadows and others will not be able to notice him, and his physical form will improve. Third, he can use the shadow form outside the shadow layer. In the real world, using this ability consumes shadow points. Fourth, in case of serious injuries, the volume of his blood will be delayed, which will slow down the approach of death. Zhang asks, what is this miraculous ability? He especially likes the fourth point. In the system window, it is written that the fourth point will work if his blood volume drops to 99%, then death will not occur. Zhang asks only if his blood volume drops by 99%. He'd rather die happy. In any case, the ability is good, and he will try it now. Zhang summons the shadow. When the shadow appears, Zhang shows one finger, and his shadow repeats this movement. They touch, and the shadow begins to envelop Zhang's body, completely absorbing it. Zhang Yu, examining his new appearance, wonders, is this the same form? This is interesting. He sighs and in an instant takes off from his place, the room in a few moments. While Yu is running, things behind him fly apart, and he exclaims with pleasure, this is speed. He then decides to lift the bed and lifts it up and down with ease. He notes again, strength. Taking a hammer weighing 100 kilograms, he hits him in the face, realizing that he has protection. Finally stopping and laughing enthusiastically, he realizes he is invincible. But at this moment, the voice of the neighbors below is heard. Who is up there? They should finally calm down. Zhang Yu, hearing this, becomes pleased. Opening the system window, he notes it doesn't catch the eye, but it has many advantages. The shape of the shadow is something. It says on the screen that a person's status as a stalker can be opened. He is surprised. It turns out, is it possible to discover something new? After this, the system shows notifications. The discovery suggests that he has part of the ability of this skill, but official, full possession of it has not yet been obtained. After full acquisition, no one else will have this ability, but there are risks. Is he willing to try? Yu hesitates, and then the system again asks him to pay attention to the fact that sometimes risks can turn into opportunities. He chooses yes or no. Yu wonders if he should try. Why not? The system marked the word risks in red. Maybe it's better for him to refuse. But risks can turn into opportunities. Having finally decided, he clicks on the yes option. But suddenly, black matter appears in the system window and approaches it. Zhang Yu immediately screams in fear. No, he hasn't fully decided yet, but it captures him in a cocoon. The medicine bottle falls to the floor and the lights are on in his apartment. As soon as the drop of medicine manages to drip onto the floor, Yu stands firmly on the floor. The system notes that the status of a killer is that if he does not take risks, he will die. He is a reborn assassin whose attacks will always deal damage. This is new. It appears in a renewed form. The system shows several notes. The first note is that guns, bows, poisons, and other foreign objects will not reproduce the effects. Note 2 is that he, as a killer in Wall, must be secretive. The higher his reputation as a killer, the more fruitful the results will be. Note 3 is that there is no salvation. Zhang Yu, examining his hands, notes that damage is caused even to a god. An information window appears in front of him again, which notes that after activating the shadow form, his killing ability will be greatly increased. The need for a certain balance of blood volume will be reduced. Decapitation occurs when the victim's blood volume reaches a certain limit. The stripe on the head turns scarlet. He can observe the gradual death of the victim. Yu notices the pig figurine and attacks it, cutting it in half. In addition, the system adds that when attacking, he can activate the decapitation skill, which depends on the blood level, strength, ability, and other factors of both parties. After reading this, he wonders beheading. Maybe this particular skill was activated last time. When did he kill the new one? Absolute damage and decapitation. Looks like he's invincible. With these words, he laughs and joyfully raises his hand up. But suddenly it stops. Stop. Yu begins to quickly remove the bandages from his body and, examining it, wonders, it's strange, weren't there any wounds? It seems that everything has passed. Having traced the scar on his hand, he also notes, by the way, even the deepest wound has disappeared. The medicine doesn't work that quickly, does it? Afterwards, Yu takes out a small piece of cotton from the wound and guesses, is it because he activated the shadow form? The power of recovery is amazing. The next day, the guy turns to Lu Yayao and asks in surprise, she should look at Yu's photo yesterday, is this true? His screen shows Yu's profile. He posted a selfie that he signed. Yesterday, he was hit by a series of blows. He was hit 88 times, but as others can see, he remained unharmed. The green-haired girl, sipping coffee through a straw, notes that yesterday he said that he met some merchant. He got into a fight with him, only he also had a knife for cutting watermelons. The guy, continuing to look at the phone and also drinking coffee, clarifies, is he injured? Maybe it's worth visiting him. Yayao silently listens to them, and then explains that they shouldn't listen to him. He was just chased by a dog yesterday. The brown-haired man clarifies what? This is true. She just thinks displeasedly, Yu is a fool who only does what he brags about. Approaching Yu's apartment, she inserts the key into the keyhole and says, if they don't believe it, they can verify it. As she turned the key, your green-haired girlfriend asked in surprise where she got the key to his house. Lu Yayao was at first surprised by her questions, but later explained that it was his uncle who gave it to her. In response, she hears only a sigh. Opening the door and going inside, she loudly says, is Yu home? Then guests came to visit him. Suddenly, his painful cry is heard. He sits on the floor in the room and tirelessly repeats how much it hurts him. What carelessness. He didn't even think that the wound might open again. At this moment, he is holding on to a bleeding wound on his stomach. Yayao shouts at him worriedly, is he okay? She immediately runs up to him and asks, does he have any more bandages? How so? He sheepishly explains that he thought it had healed, so he took off the bandages. The girl watching this in surprise notes that it looks like he wasn't lying that he was hurt. The guy next to her agrees, yes, he thinks so too. Suddenly, they run up to him and begin to examine his muscles. The brown-haired man, touching his biceps, exclaims when he managed to get so pumped up. Now it's clear why he rushed into battle with the merchant. The girl also touching his abs says, how lovely. But Lu Yayao takes them aside and explains, okay, that was enough. They can go to the living room. They smiled cheerfully and answered for the food. They understood, but she shouldn't push them. When they move away, Yu's painful groan is heard again behind them. The guy turns to the green-haired girl and asks, will it make him feel better? She says hopefully. Lu Yayao applies a special product to the wound, and Yu continues to complain, it hurts so much. She says displeasedly, he should stop, she knows this ointment, it doesn't hurt at all. He notices her red, bruised knees and says in embarrassment, he thinks that her wound needs to be treated well. There is an awkward pause between them. She continues to apply ointment to his wound, and then sternly says he fights too much, so she asks Zio-kun to give him medicine. Yu again, confused, notes that he shouldn't have done this. He's stupid and clumsy. It will only get worse. Lu Yayao looked at him contentedly, grabbed him by the cheek and said, Uncle Lai needs to keep an eye on him. But he mentally adds, it seems to him that he won't do anything anyway. She suddenly frowns and wonders what he was doing yesterday. Only he should not brag and come up with all sorts of nonsense answers. Yu is surprised by her questions, but explains that it was just a chivalrous act of justice. She grins incredulously and says, he's lying. At this moment, he thinks, what else should he say? Did he run into the shadow layer, kill someone else there, and then return? Will she believe it? After that, she begins to bandage his stomach and asks, by the way, what time did Lu return yesterday? Yayao says upset, he didn't come back. What? Yu, looking down, explains that it seems to him that the night watch works quite cruelly. Main work during the day, extra hours in the evening, it's dangerous. She doesn't answer, and her face takes on an upset look. Yu, looking at her, understands that Lu Yayao is worried about his father. Most night watch officers put their lives in danger every day. Uncle Lai was left without an arm. Lin Mo generally died at the age of over 20 years. Even a strong man like his uncle was seriously injured, which radically affected his endurance. He will have no further advancement. Yayao, trying to smile and change the subject, asks if he passes the martial arts exam. Will he come to work on the night watch? There is an awkward pause again. He answers, lost in thoughts, he doesn't know. But then, embarrassed, he adds, are there any beauties there? Lu Yayao screams dissatisfied, he should shut his mouth. With these words, she again grabs his cheek, and he is indignant that it hurts him a lot. She just shouldn't hit him. A green-haired girl and a guy are standing leaning against the door at this time and eavesdropping. Yu screams again, she needs to relax. Do such things exist? She chuckles and clarifies, he didn't see. Well, now she will show him. He immediately asks, she must stop. She shouldn't do this. The brown-haired man turns to the girl and asks in confusion what is going on with them. She frowns and answers, is he still asking? Finally, Jong-yu and Lu Yayao come out to the living room. The guy and the girl look at him in surprise, and Yu, embarrassed, asks why they came. He explains that they didn't hear that he had a hard time yesterday, so they decided to visit him. She adds, smiling, is he feeling better? Suddenly, she notices red spots on his arm, neck, and face and wonders, are these marks from kisses? Yayao is so energetic. Jong sits on the sofa and explains that they don't have to worry, he's fine, they can also sit down. When they sit down with him, he begins to tell them they don't know anything yet, he went to buy soy sauce. And when he left the store, a large man flashed past him with a bag in his hands. Lu Yayao, listening to him, said with dissatisfaction, he is doing it again. Then, taking the jacket, she explains that she will go to the store and throw it away on the way, it is still torn. He, I don't pay attention to her, answers okay, she can throw it away. And immediately he continues to tell the guy and the girl, who listened to him with their mouths open, and then 8 more hefty men ran out of the forest, one of them even had a large knife. But suddenly he stops and looks to the side excitedly. Realizing what happened, he jumps off the couch and runs up to Yayao and shouts, she must stop, he still has things there. But Jong-yu doesn't have time to pick up his jacket when suddenly something falls out of his pocket onto the floor. It turns out to be a pack of gaskets. She smiles evilly and asks why he needs this. Yu replies, didn't she have a stomach ache yesterday? He wanted to give it to her when it came from the store and just make it nice. The brown-haired man, watching what is happening, thinks that this kind of thing can only be shared by people close to each other. The girl, photographing everything with pleasure, understands that she will show it to the whole class. Jong-yu picks up the package and passes it to Lu Yayao and explains, okay, but she can take it, if something happens, she shouldn't be shy. But after a pause, she squeezes it tightly in her hand and then screams that she didn't need it. With these words, she throws the packet directly at him, leaving a red mark on Jong-yu's forehead. He exclaims in bewilderment, she is angry, but why shout like that? His classmates suddenly say goodbye to him. Well, they too will probably go. Doesn't wish him good luck. They also add that Yayao and Yu look good together. She, hearing this, wonders what. The door closes and Jong-yu, left alone, notes that everyone has left. Now no one will bother him. He opens his palm and says, pupil of the shadow. A black circle appears underneath it, glowing blue. Yu says the special phrase again, shadow form. Black tentacles envelop him, and part of him turns into shadow. He notes that he should start with training. Blue streams rise above Jong-yu, and he finds himself in the shadow layer. Looking around, he notes that this is strange. There should be a lot of pollution here, but for some reason there is only comfort. Suddenly, he adds, he feels as if for a long time he lived in a polluted environment, then suddenly found himself in an endless and clean space. The red line above his head shows 60%, and he thinks that's good, his stomach doesn't hurt, and his blood volume has increased. Resting his hands on the floor, he announces, okay, he should start. Yu almost lies completely on the floor, when suddenly he pushes off and jumps up to the ceiling. Landing on the floor, he laughs and screams, inexhaustible energy all around. So he continues to do so and counts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. After a while, he reaches hundreds, 101, 102, 103, 104. The system explains that the shadow form was turned on. The shadow layer was reached. He felt how the energy of his body was completely released. He became free. He also tried to train. During training, the shadow bite is activated, which absorbs only darkness from the shadow layer. His physical condition is significantly strengthened. Dark matter absorbs Jong-yu more and more, and the system repeats that during exercises the physical condition is strengthened. His performance increases, and it adds that during exercise his physical condition becomes stronger. Bright blue discharges emanate from Yu, and he notes that about 1,000 methods of strengthening have been received. Looking around, he realizes there is too little space here, he should train outside. Everything outside is painted green. He is sitting on the sports ground and meditating. Reasoning, he asks, since he is so capable in this world, shouldn't he be worshipped? Grasping the bar with one hand, he begins to spin up and down, stand on it with his feet, and hang head down. During this, he decides he will become a horizontal bar champion. The next day, at the Night Watch headquarters, several people in formal suits with red ties, led by a man with glasses, walk down the corridor and enter the large hall. At this time, a man with a short haircut holding a gray folder in his hands says, according to reports, disturbances in the shadow layer have become more frequent. At the moment, it has an unpredictable character. The level of pollution has increased sharply and is spreading over large areas. B3, B7, A2 squads discovered gaps in the northern, southern, and eastern districts. The pink-haired girl also opens the blue folder and adds they will have a hard time. Judging by the distribution map of the front lines, the pollution covers mainly residential areas. They are random, as it was before. Lu, sitting at the head of the table and listening to the report of one of the soldiers, reflects that recently others appear much more often. In the past 2 days, there have been 4 incidents of people being dragged into the shadow layer. In front of him lies the personal file of the deceased Lin Mo. The photographs show the moment when he was found. He continues to think it may seem that this is extremely little, but no one knows when the others will attack next time. Compared to the shadow layer anomaly, breaches are much more dangerous. If you compare someone in the shadow layer with a ferocious monster, it feels as if Godzilla has launched an attack. Lee enters the room, trying to cheer up those present and exclaiming, okay, they should not be discouraged. Sitting down on the table, he notes that it's just a suspicion. There's no point in pretending that they've already lost. Besides, aren't they ready for battle? The soldiers frowned at him and did not answer. Lu nods affirmatively at them, and they look at each other and smile slightly. Then Lee announces, okay, the answerer can continue. A man holding a piece of paper in his hands agrees, okay. He will now move on to the recently suspended. After a while, when the clouds are gathering over the city, Lu stands at the panoramic glass and, looking at the sky, takes out a pack of cigarettes from his jacket pocket. He lights one of them and says it was necessary to get into such a mess right before the new year. Taking out a lighter from another pocket of his jacket, his friend is surprised. What is it? Having carefully examined the cigarette, he wonders, is it a cookie? His cigarettes were changed again. At that moment, a pack of cigarettes flies towards him, which he easily catches. Looking to the side, he sees Lee addressing him. What's wrong with his face? Having lit one cigarette, he clarifies, does he want this too? But Lu picks up that pack of cigarettes that he threw away, and taking a bite of the cookie, replies, it doesn't matter, he's just afraid of lung cancer. Lee asks mockingly, is he afraid of this? But he angrily explains that he shouldn't talk nonsense. Why did he leave him? But requires an answer. Lee exhales smoke and explains that something else came from above. Lu is excited and asks, what is this? He asks again in confusion more. Approaching the desk, he is silent, and sitting down, he clarifies that this is also urgent. Is there any confirmation? Lee continues to smoke a cigarette, points to the side, and explains that he can check the laptop. Lu immediately reveals this while asking what direction his daughter will go, humanities or martial arts. An urgent notification appears on the laptop screen. If the special ones are of the 2nd or higher rank, then it is highly recommended that their children apply for admission, but first they are required to pass an exam. After reading this, he explains that they haven't thought yet. They won't wait for the exam results first. Closing the laptop, he says, why are they still talking about him? What about Lee? He feels that he is being honest with his abilities. And overall, does it stand out at all? He takes the cigarette out of his mouth and again, exhaling white smoke, says sadly, he doesn't think so. Lu asks if he wants to send the guy to study special humanities. But Lee answers in the negative, no, let him learn ordinary crafts. He is perplexed. Is this a joke or something? The guy hasn't even been tested yet. What if he passes it brilliantly? It is known that admission to the faculty of special people is mandatory. Lu puts out his cigarette, and as he leaves and puts on his jacket, he replies, they will see this. Lee turns after him and asks what. He should express himself more clearly, but he, quickly passing by the pink-haired girl, only answers that he must perform his duties with special care. The girl coughs slightly and apologizes for disturbing him. Lee turns to her and clarifies what is the matter, she must say. She places a black folder in front of him and explains, here, a message has just been received from the shadow layer. He takes it in his hands and reads it carefully and sighs heavily. New report on others. Number D299627. Codename Crazy Athlete, Day That Salutes. Observer unknown. The description is that he is, firstly, an enemy dark, day-like creature. The target was first discovered in the central garden of Kingyu. It is assumed that it was found in society by chance. Secondly, the target does not get tired at all and shows great interest in sports. There is no desire to attack. Thirdly, when the detector approaches, the enemy stops training and salutes. Observation time is 2 hours. Hazard rating is low. In custody and cannot be destroyed at this time. The girl also reads the information and says, observers discovered a strange other. There is no entry for him in the database, so she would like to question him. Lu gritting his teeth in indignation, thinking, what else is this? Night comes, the moon brightly illuminates everything around. In the shadow layer, it is also nighttime. On one of the streets, there is a huge red glowing monster. John Yu films everything on his phone and says, and again the spider. This contains a lot of protein, which is several times more than the same rice. Spider meat is very juicy and delicious. After cauterization, the hair is easily removed. Viewers should try it. They will immediately understand that spider meat is like no other. Turning around the corner, he notes with satisfaction that so many people have appreciated the shadow layer. It's incredible. Very soon it will become popular on the internet. He is broadcasting live on his phone and suddenly wonders what. Are there others filming others? Country, I haven't even published anything yet. Suddenly, a loud scream is heard, which scares you. He looks forward, and an information window appears in front of him, which reminds him that the attribute is a shadow. Abilities are a form of shadow decapitation. It lies in the fact that if he does not act first, he will die. He shouldn't be afraid to kill. Only after a series of constant murders will he be able to continue his quiet life. He should enjoy the process of killing until he reaches the advanced level. Jong-yu reads this and hits the screen and screams. Did it decide to scare him? Suddenly he sees the following inscription and wonders what. The system notifies him that the deadline is 100 hours. He wonders with horror, will his life end in 100 hours? The phrase continues to spin in Yu's head. The deadline is 100 hours. He looks at the information window and wonders, how is this possible? Why are there only 100 hours left? He recalls how the system explained that there would be certain risks when opening this skill. He naturally asks himself the question, so there are certain risks that were mentioned earlier. This is a real problem. Then he exhales and thinks he needs to calm down. The main thing is not to worry. He needs to think of something. He again remembers the description of beheading that the system showed him and understands, judging by this, he needs to fulfill the position of a hunter and hunt. In other words, he can live while he kills others. The system also explains, firstly, a risky life and constant killing is an integral part of a hunter's life. Perhaps he will gain eternal life by committing endless murders, or maybe not. Jae-in-yu thoughtfully says, judging by the text, through hunting you can get immortality. The system complements, secondly, decapitation also has another personality. Upon the death of the physical body, it will simply pass into another shell. He looks at the picture on the screen and wonders, what does the other shell mean? And what does it mean to enjoy the process of killing? He can't be happy because of this. If he can't kill someone else, he'll have to turn to Uncle Lai. Peering around the corner of the building and looking at the spider, Jong-yu realizes that he should kill it to earn life points. This opportunity is quite rare, so he should make a video. With these words, he leans the phone on the trash can and props it up with a stone. Yu reasons in any case, he is not afraid that the gap will start to catch him. It is impossible. After that, he clearly pronounces shadow. Jong-yu immediately takes the form of a shadow. The phone starts filming, he appears on the screen and exclaims, there are quite a few others, now viewers can watch one of them. Hyo welcomes everyone. There are a lot of comments on the live stream. Why is he so black? Is he wearing clothes? In response to this person, they write that this is very obvious. Someone exclaims that he has a cute outfit. 7 new comments appear in the chat. The newcomer sings, dances, and comes up with all sorts of tricks for fun. The live broadcast system explains that the live broadcast time is from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m., from 8 p.m. to 11 a.m. Will there be disc dancing too? It's clear that it's quite difficult to meet him, which is a shame, of course. Violation of laws is prohibited by the platform. Any prohibited content, incitement, cheating, and other actions of this nature will be seriously punished. Viewers should not transfer money to dubious persons. This is followed by a notification that the Stable Peach has joined the live stream. Zhang Zi joined the live broadcast. 10 fish were received. In the future, they can be exchanged for prizes. Chenggang joined the live broadcast. The camera films Jong-yu approaching the spider and suggesting that they don't need to make any noise, rather than just wait quietly and give him a stick. He will come closer and closer, so it is better to remain silent so as not to disturb the silence. New comments appear, he is very cool. It's real? Great. Coming closer to the monster and swinging, Yu notes that the steel on which several thousand yuan was spent is about to go into action. The spider notices him and growls loudly, but he suddenly appears behind him. The monster turns around again, but Jong-yu is ahead of him and again stands behind it. His heartbeat quickens and he realizes something has gone wrong. Looking at the monster, who stopped in bewilderment, he notes that even if he stands close, it will not be able to see him. He just loves the shape of the shadow. Sighing heavily, he understands that now he needs to learn about the monster's weaknesses. The spider stands up on its hind legs, and at this moment Yu notices a red hole on its back, from which energy rays emanate. Frowning, he mentally exclaims here. Sharply pulling the metal stick forward and smiling slyly, he thinks with pleasure, now the spider will get what he deserves. Half an hour before, the spider stood still and enjoyed the atmosphere. She was thinking, she has been in this world for a long time. The atmosphere is very comfortable. There is no depressing atmosphere, and there are no terrifying and strong guys. You just need to be careful, then it can live in complete comfort. Scratches himself and notes, but he literally just had to fight one ugly guy. It was a little injured, but at least she got a full meal. Lying down on the ground, The spider adds that it needs to sleep a little and then it will recover. But suddenly it squints, the spider sensor goes off, and it realizes that someone is watching. Rising to its paws and not noticing Jong Yu, it wonders, strange, where did it come from? It was definitely somewhere nearby. Oh well, this place always seemed unsafe, so he would just spend the night somewhere else. Moving to the side, the spider stops and wonders what is this. Suddenly someone hits him on the sly, and energy discharges rise in the air. Yu stuck a bat into the back of the spider and noted, amazingly, he felt the day flowing out of him like a river. Does it mean that by finding the right point to strike, he will be able to release all its power? He takes the bat back and notes, great. The monster only has 40% of his blood left, a couple more hits. But suddenly a bright ray of light approaches him, and it appears, what is it? Jong Yu is thrown aside and directly into the wall. But he says, chuckling, it doesn't hurt him at all. The spider stands on its hind legs and screams in pain. Noticing the decreasing percentage of blood, he rejoices, great. He plunged the stick straight into the weak point of it, thereby causing bleeding. Yu gets to his feet and uses his ability, a shadow attack. It turns into liquid and flows down. Finding himself in the depths and seeing a spider from below, he wonders, is this a shadow attack? He skillfully attacks from the shadows like a stalker. There is no need to fight another face-to-face, you just need to wait for the right moment to attack, and then deal a fatal blow to the victim. Other, especially hunter-prey, the hunt begins. A man on the phone screen in a live broadcast announces that the Night Watch is guarding the safety of citizens. He greets everyone, and this member of the Night Watch is at work. Today, he will explain the construction of low-ranking others. The girl scrolls through the feed, and in the next live broadcast, a girl with green hair greets everyone. Her name is Lalala. Today, she is going to a small restaurant in the alley. The girl dangles her legs in the air and scrolls through the next live broadcast. The man admits that he's been quite busy lately. The next girl announces that she is helping her family. There is a jacket, underwear, and a magazine on the bed. The next vlogger says this lighter is her family. If she can't pick it up, then she's finished. A girl with white hair lying on the bed is disappointed and notes that this is nonsense. There has been nothing interesting lately. Real boredom. Suddenly she notices something interesting. She comes across Jong Yu's broadcast, who announces that his name is Yu. He is from Beidou. She wonders what kind of place this is. The phone screen shows unknown creatures flying across the sky and a monster jumping from the roof of one building to another. She immediately jumps up on the bed and asks, were they different? Indeed. Isn't this staged? Yu points to the side and explains, this creature behind him is called a shadow spider. It is an ancient type of ghost, the first rank, the lowest another. Many comments also appear on the screen. He is so handsome and cold, isn't he? The man writes dissatisfiedly, it's strange they have problems. He would rather eat something tasty. The girl writes that she would buy a lot of useful things. It's a pity she doesn't have much money. Jong Yu, not paying attention to this, continues to explain, the shackles on the spider can make terrible sounds, ordinary people will not stand it, so it is better for them not to listen to such things. The girl frowns and, looking closely, exclaims, commentators are idiots. All they do is post their disgusting and made-up comments on the internet. If only their parents could see what they are writing about. She hates their cocky behavior. Then she freezes and quickly starts writing that she can help him. Yu turns into a shadow and sinks into the depths. Seeing this, she is perplexed. Has he disappeared? Is this broadcast being hosted by someone else? But after that, she smiles and says, it seems that everything becomes much more interesting. Yu jumps out at the spider from behind and throws a stick at it. Monster growls in pain and stands on its hind legs. A bright red ray emerges from the ground and pierces the spider. It is allowed to run to the side. It is very surprised when it sees an unknown ray. Suddenly, Jong Yu touches the monster with his finger. When it turns around angrily, Yu smiles and exclaims, he's here. The spider tries to attack him, but he dodges every time and mockingly says, it missed again. He's here. Well, the spider is so big, but it can't reach it. A girl with gray hair watches the broadcast and, covered with a blanket, says enthusiastically, it was very fast. He is handsome. What a fast and handsome presenter he is. The spider shoots out a large purple beam. Purple substance on the ground and surrounds the monster. It laughs contentedly, but suddenly turns around when Jong Yu's voice is heard nearby. He asks, does the spider think that it can't do anything if the ground is covered in acid? It spots him on the roof of a building, and he briefly says, shadows everywhere. With these words, he falls down. It tries to overpower it with acid, but Yu finds out that it can move freely in it. Teleport, go through buildings as much as necessary. He is a hunter and from the shadows. With these words, he picks up a metal stick and adds that the endless killing began to destroy his memory, but he remembers his own name clearly. Suddenly, he sticks a stick into the spider's head and it groans in pain. Jong Yu adds, his name is Yu, and the night still continues. He leaves his palm on the dead spider and says, "Shadow bite." The black substance begins to absorb it and give it to Jong-yu. He is surrounded by white ribbons that spread over his body and turn into a white cloak. He understands the hunt is over. People, having seen the transformation on live television, are perplexed. What is this? A movie about superheroes? Is everything for real? No special effects? He is so beautiful. They love it. The girl enthusiastically presses the phone to her chest and exclaims how exciting it is. She hasn't seen anything like this for a long time. After that, she goes to his page. His name in the profile is written as Assassin. Jong-yu has 722,000 likes, 3 follows, and 89,000 followers. She notes that she needs to make sure he notices her. Having pressed the subscribe button, she thoughtfully says, maybe she will be able to establish contact with this blogger. After that, she sends him a message. Would he like to take Star V on a mission? The system presents the profile of the monster, the name of this shadow spider. It's from a species of ancient demon. The spider is at the first level of the middle rank. The description is that it is of the lowest other abyss, belonging to the genus of the ancient demon. The lines on the spider's body represent the power of this. The denser and more complex they are, the higher the pollution that comes from the spider. You shouldn't look at it for a long time. The shadow spider's abilities are acid, net-spitting, ancient demon pollution. The price of murder is the confusion of the 5 senses. Thanks to the shadow bite, firstly, the shadow net ability is obtained. Secondly, shadow glasses and other entries have been added. You, having read this with disappointment, understands that it turns out that the monster is only the first level of the middle rank, and he thought that he had defeated a strong enemy. There was a large gap in strength between him and this other, but he took advantage of the shadow attack. After that, he takes the phone and sees that the number of spectators is 150 people. He thinks happily he has so many viewers. He then chucklingly announces the live broadcast is over. Well, for today, he will leave the audience in the dark and pique their interest. After this, a long thread appears around his arm. He wonders what? Is this a shadow network? Jong-yu shoots a net at one of the buildings and takes off from the ground, flying through the air. At first he is scared, but then he begins to laugh joyfully. He is a man with the powers of a spider. Suddenly Yu hits the wall of the building and falls down. But standing on a street lamp, he says with dissatisfaction how much it hurts him. It seems he will need more practice with this network. An information window appears in front of it, which explains the period is 7 days. When he sees this, he is surprised. Has life expectancy really increased by only 3 days? This is less than he expected. Despite the fact that he has 7 more days left, others are not so easy to find. He needs backup. The system window appears again and shows note number 3. The hunter must hide in the shadows. The more he hides, the higher his reputation. A high-pitched signal is heard, and the systems know that a new value, authority, has been unlocked. Marking implies that he can mark his victim to make it easier to find weak points. Which he is going to mark will be heart palpitations, fear, and other negative states. The result depends on the difference in strength. For a single target, a mark can only be created for 1 second. As reputation increases, this time increases. He must also note that each tag costs a certain amount of energy. This ability reveals its location. Jong-yu should use this with extreme caution. Also in the hunting section, it is written that when he hunts marked prey, he gains agility and strength. If he manages to hunt successfully, one of their attributes or abilities will be improved to a certain extent. Also note that hunting does not require energy consumption, and this ability has the same duration as the mark. Therefore, you must kill the prey within the hunting time, and increasing his reputation will enhance his ability. Having read this, he rubs the back of his head and clarifies, has authority been unblocked? When did he become famous? Looking at the number of viewers, he wonders if it's because of the live broadcast. Then he will hunt others, gain subscribers, and discover new abilities. With this set, both strength and abilities will increase. Okay, today he needs to try a little more. Suddenly, he notices a red mark and wonders what it is. Behind one of the buildings, there is a huge purple monster with spikes along its back. Jong-yu shouts joyfully he found it. Then he jumps off the lantern and landing on the ground announces decapitation. His smile widens like that of a madman. Meanwhile, in the apartment building, Yu received a strong blow to the face. He jumped up, grabbed his cheek, and screamed in pain. This was done by Yao, who stood over him and asked him what all this was about. Who did he fight with again? She took the disposal agent and brought the cotton wool to his face. He asked her to calm down and said that he was going to become a hero, and she would not understand this. She grinned and asked again, is this true? Many heroes whine every day how much they hurt. She stuck cotton into his nose and told him that he shouldn't get into it unless he had the right skills. He gritted his teeth at her actions, after which he turned around and said that he could heal his injuries in a matter of seconds with the help of the shadow form, and he did not turn it on at all so that she would help him. She frowned and asked again with curiosity, what was he talking about? He grabbed a bottle of water in his hands and asked again, what? Maybe they'll watch a movie. He would love to do it. She answered, there is nothing special to see. Picking up the phone and scrolling through some movie titles, she said that a blogger had recently appeared who had aroused everyone's interest. Her face turned red from embarrassment, and you asked again, interest? Yao brought the phone to his face and asked him to look at it. He was dumbfounded and saw his shadow, which was saying that his name was EU and he was a shadow killer. Because of this, he choked on water and began to cough, and Yao asked what happened to him. Is he that stunned? With a frightened expression on his face, he said that nothing had happened. So has she been watching it lately? She answered, of course, 2 days already. This guy has become the most popular and unusual blogger. You scratched the back of his head with discomfort and asked again, is this true? Then this is very cool, but isn't the publication of others punishable by law? He understood that he had somehow become famous too quickly, and it was necessary for the Night Watch not to catch him. Yao noticed his anxiety and said that he should not divulge his knowledge about them. His current testimony does not particularly affect people's consciousness, so everything is fine. Let him watch a real fight with someone else. She grabbed his hand and sat closer, after which she asked him again, isn't he cool? He needs to follow his example. You became embarrassed and silently looked at the phone screen, and she continued to beg him to look at it, because there was another video, but another blogger had already analyzed his videos. You smiled at her reaction and continued to watch her, when suddenly she turned around and asked if he thought she could become famous too. He looked away and asked again, what would she be filming? Will she put on a white silk dress and start dancing in the shadow layer? She screamed sharply, covering her body with her hands, that this would never happen. Is it possible to record several videos about others? Yu was afraid of her reaction, became embarrassed, and, looking away, asked if she thought it would be somehow too informative. Will she be just like a member of the Night's Watch? By the way, if she goes out in this outfit, her fans will start following her. Yao frowned and looked at him menacingly, and Yu said that nothing good should be expected from this, and she asked again, anything good? Suddenly she was behind him and took the gun in her hand, placed it on his back, and asked if he got his injury while he was also tracking someone. Yu shouted with his hands in the air that he was just joking. Yao pushed him with the muzzle of the gun and screamed. How could she know that he was telling the truth? He addressed her as an officer and asked for a break, but she shouted back, no, he must go and prepare food. He collapsed on the sofa and opened personal messages and spoke. She finally left, when suddenly something alerted him, and he noticed some more messages. People asked him questions. Who is he and why are they publishing these videos? Is he from Beidou? Uncle, is he from the Night Watch? Is this some kind of scenario? Does he have any other pictures? Are you sure this isn't Photoshop? Now they will have a recipe for stewed pork breast. They need to peel it off the skin, cut it into slices, and prepare green onions. You read these messages and said that the amount of this even irritates him a little. But what kind of jokes are these? Do they think he's a fraud? He clicked on the link and suddenly a voice said to him, hello, the earthly Tao is with him. Today they will not go shopping and will better deal with one scammer. You began to carefully look at the phone screen and asked in a trembling voice, what? Many people said, wow, how cool this is. He will continue to watch it. All is well with him. This is reality. Someone insisted that the video was fake. He doesn't deserve this. The Night Watch works hard, and he is the center of attention. Stop pretending already, and he should take off his mask. The earthly Tao, whose number of viewers was 100, broadcast live and asked, did they all watch that video? What kind of EU is this? Who is he? Suddenly, a system alert appeared on his screen that the country's police were reminding him to create a favorable and harmonious atmosphere in his broadcasts, and he should not show anything that is contrary to the laws. The earthly Tao continued to speak, the shadow layer, the other, the amnesiac killer, various songs. Do they really think this? He shows them the video and asks them to analyze it carefully. First, you need to look at these two frames. You can see that there is no smooth transition between them, and accordingly, the video is stitched together. If you look at the background again, it is quite obvious that editing was carried out after the video was shot. Meanwhile, the earthly Tao was asking, so why did he decide to review it? It's simple, he is a freelance member of the Night Watch, and when he was young, he killed countless others, so he can recognize a fake at a glance. Now they will discuss something else. You pressed the comment button on his phone and saw many users writing a message. One of them said that he did not believe that he was filming the truth. How can you fake the shadow layer of something else? Then why do you need to edit the video? Was the whole story fake from the start? So what's wrong with that? He would not say that this video is fake. One of them thought that there were several problems with the objects, and he thought that she had no power. One of the girls wrote, yes, she trusts the man from the Night Watch more. You grinned and said that they were just fools and did not understand anything, but someday they would learn the truth. You got up from the sofa, stretched and said, oh well, since his video is a fake, Then it's time to start hunting for others, but before that he needs to teach this earthly Tao a lesson. Meanwhile, one of the guys who was in an unknown space on an illuminated platform extended his hand and said he is a debtor. The blogger is fake. Horrible. Is this really true? Now he is confused. It turned out to be not so simple. Who is he anyway? He doubts that this is an ordinary person. He doesn't think like that. A born hunter, a person who terrifies his enemies. Among the abandoned buildings and many pipes, he picked up a mini camera and stuck it on his jacket, thinking that it seemed like the number of others was less than yesterday. The shadow layer is reset from time to time. Suddenly something alerted him and he asked what was happening. It looks like there is another rank 6 behind him. He needs to take action. He grabbed the club in his hands and said with a grin that he would now see what someone of the 6th rank was capable of. The hunt has begun. He took a step to the side, standing on the edge of the roof, but suddenly stopped, sighed a little trembling, and began to go down the stairs, saying that he needed to act calmly and without sudden movements. A powerful killer who hunts others is not, but a cute special person walking up the stairs is suitable. A monster, illuminated with a purple glow, found itself among the walls and roared loudly. You paused and said "Mark," after which a magic circle appeared in front of the monster, and it made him very wary. You thought that everything was working out for him, and the marked one at the same moment felt an inexplicable fear. By the way, this monster is very similar to the other one with blades that he had already encountered before. Has it really evolved? You grinned and asked again, so what? He too has undergone changes. He used the 6th strike technique and the blade, and then hit the monster directly in the stomach with the sword. The monster's blood data dropped to 45%, and this alerted him. He took a step, jumped high, and said, "Now." The chase has begun. The system reports that the tag in pursuit has been activated. Strength and agility increased by 1 second. Additional boosts can be obtained by killing a target within a certain period of time. EU swung his weapon at the monster again and hit it right in the building, causing everything to glow with a bright light, and EU did not expect such a turn of events at all, since the monster turned out to be right next to him unharmed. He pushed off from the wall of the building and continued to catch up with the monster, after which he landed in front of this creature, which made loud noises and moved its appendages in different directions to intimidate. EU paused, and the monster opened its mouth and emitted magic rings, which made Yu's head spin, and he realized that the monster was mentally attacking him. His entire body was covered in bright purple sparks, which surprised him. He cleared his throat, landed nearby, and looked at his hands and said that it was quite powerful. According to its characteristics, it is less than 66% of blood, since the monster consumed 34% in one blow. The monster again attacked him, and you realized that this creature had a very powerful attack, and he needed to stick to some kind of strategy. A moment later, when many purple flashes appeared around his body, he grinned and said in a trembling voice that the monster could not hit him. The struggle continued between them and loud sounds were heard everywhere. The monster continued to approach and suddenly found itself directly opposite the frightened one. The monster pulled out its appendages from its mouth and looked around questioningly. While it was close to this creature, it immediately rushed at it, after which it grinned and called the monster and said that, in fact, it was on top. Even though it has evolved, the skills remain the same, and this is its territory. Today, the monster is not in the black. With these words, you attacked his opponent with multiple hits to the creature's body, causing it to growl loudly. You asked again, so is he still trying to get out of the situation? The monster won't succeed. After prolonged bright flashes of light, the monster paused and dark shadows appeared from the eyes of this creature. You attacked it with his bare hands, which he closed together and said, "Beheading." Suddenly, he stopped abruptly in front of the monster's face and began to breathe deeply, wondering what was going on. It's from the Night Watch. Instead of the monster, the head of a man began to appear, and he asked what was the matter. Wasn't he taken? Why did he become like this and is here again? The creature again let out a loud growl, because of which you became wary and backed away, after which the monster turned around and rushed in the other direction, and you finally shouted to it to stop. He tried to catch up and said he just wanted to talk. After a while, he stopped and tried to catch his breath, continuing to take steps with a frightened expression on his face. The system reported that he had found his prey, and that he was a man passionate about his work, so he was looking forward to the next successful hunt. He continued to stand above the ground and read that the hunt was almost a success. But at the last moment, the victim disappeared, and unfortunately the hunt failed. He should also note that prolonged failure will weaken him and shorten his lifespan. Deep down in his soul, he understands that only constant hunting will increase his authority, and he will gain power over death. But in the moment, he wonders what it means to live. Is this hunting or something else? EU continued to be silent, and the system reported several times. In this case, there is an expectation of death, a constant wait. He punched the system, which repeated too many times about waiting, and he got angry and shouted to stop and stop doing it. There was a loud crash. He exhaled, grabbed his head and said, "A hero who sacrifices himself to save people becomes like this." After that, he removed his hand from his face and saw his reflection, and asked a question: if he dies, will he also turn into a monster? His whole body glowed with magical light. He clenched his hand into a fist and said that there was no turning back. He must continue to hunt. Eastern District Number 1, the gathering place, is a wasteland. He looked at the phone, after which he turned his attention to the sky and said that he was here. The news said that others always gather here, so he had nothing to worry about. He spoke. The pupil of a shadow and bright blue sparks and dark magical powers appeared around his body. A dark hole appeared above the building, through which he placed himself directly on the roof. And when he looked around, he thought, of course, the number of others here is much larger, but they are not very brave and therefore will not leave the buildings. EU heard a loud sound and wondered if there was one on the roof. Opposite him, a creature appeared that glowed with a bright purple color. He watched it from the side and thought, this is an incredibly strong monster. But this creature's leg is seriously damaged, and therefore the blood volume has dropped. This is great. He won't back down anymore. He came out of the shadows and approached the monster, stopping opposite. The monster took notice of him and tried to attack him with its magic balls. EU disappeared from his place and found himself in thick dust and was silently under his protective barrier, through which he looked at the monster and wondered, is it so vigilant? The others here are much more careful than in his territory. This monster seems to be very sensitive. The red spots on the body have weakened. Is it because of mindfulness? No, we need to calm this down somehow. You'll have to be patient and wait for it to calm down. The monster moved, and he realized that he could act and said, "Mark." After his words, a magic circle appeared around his eye, and he looked at it with anger. After some time, Yeaya was preparing a dish in the kitchen, and without turning to the door, she asked menacingly, where was he? He returned late. I could have helped her. She was surprised when she saw her uncle and father behind her. Did uncle also look at her menacingly and ask what she said? Is she cooking for Zhang Yu again? The father replied, apparently he was raising his daughter for their family. Yeaya grinned and said that dad was talking nonsense again. So why did they come back so early? He replied that the office was done with business, and that's why they decided to leave. They rarely managed to get together and have a tasty meal. Maybe they'll go to a restaurant. Yeaya became sad and replied that there was no need for that because she was almost finished. He scratched the back of his head in bewilderment, after which Uncle Lai said that in this case they would go to a restaurant another day, and he offered to sit together. After that, he turned to her with another question, is there you? She replied that she didn't know that, maybe he went out for a walk. Suddenly, you opened the doors while my uncle was saying that this was outrageous. How could he have fun and leave her here alone? You burst into the room and shouted that he really wanted to eat because he was hungry. He quickly took off his sneakers and asked right from the entrance Yeaya, what did she cook today? It smells incredibly delicious. Today he is in a good mood, and so he decided to buy her favorite candy. Does she know that it cost him dearly because he was almost killed by dogs along the way? She wrote so much. Are you bored or what? Uncle Lai grabbed his head in anger, and everyone looked at him silently. He was dumbfounded when he realized that everyone had returned home and swallowed his saliva in fear, after which he put the candy in his pocket and said that he was detained by a dog and he got into trouble on the road. That's exactly what happened. Lee raised his hand and said, okay, it's rare to have a minute to sit together, so there's no need to spoil the fun and he can sit down at the table. He sat you right next to him and said, grabbing him by the shoulder, that all the guys fight and there's nothing wrong with it, right? You smiled, lowered his gaze, and did not answer. Lu said, pouring a drink into a glass, that he doesn't see anything in showing off to the girl he likes when a person is still young, so everything is in order. By the way, he saw him walking with a lady in a short skirt. What is her name? Yeaya replied that it was Yu Zhaoer. The father spoke back, exactly. She is good-looking, bright, clean, and not lacking in figure. When he was young, he would have given anything for such a girl. After that, he raised his glass over the table and told his uncle that they would drink to his success. Yu smiled silently and wondered how he could speak like that in front of Yeaya. Her face turned red. Lei replied, okay, he suggests we raise our glasses. Yu looked at Uncle Lu with admiration and said that they would drink to him. Mentally, he said that these two would not leave a wet spot on him. He immediately got up and drank the contents of the glass to the bottom in one gulp, despite the fact that the drink was non-alcoholic. Lu grinned and said, and he's pretty good. After that, Yu leaned back in his chair, reached for a plate of food and said, okay, Uncle should eat vegetables. He is not at home all day, and he does not think that he often gets to eat Yeaya food. Lu replied that this was a rather rare opportunity. Yu smiled and said, well, he thinks that Yeaya often cooks at home, and it is not surprising that her skill is at its best. Suddenly, Lu was dumbfounded, turned to her and wondered what. Then why is he eating takeout? Apparently, she puts a lot of effort into taking care of Jong-yu and even prepares such a variety of dishes. When he looked at her, she was eating the dishes with incredible embarrassment and did not look at anyone. Lu finished the contents of the glass and grinned and thought, that's how. Lai also turned to Jong-yu and said to drink to Uncle Lu again, and Yu replied, Uncle Lu, they're drinking in honor of him. He wishes him success in his work. Lu thanked him for this, and after some time, Yao and his father headed towards the exit, and Yu near the door wished them a good journey. Li said to his friend, see you later. Lu, meanwhile, looked at his daughter with a grin, who waved her hand and said that they would meet tomorrow. The door to the apartment slammed. I took the bottle and asked Lai if he was thirsty. He answered no, after which he sat down on the sofa, and Yu approached him while he was drinking water, and the water was dripping from his face. Li silently looked into the distance when he suddenly said that he would like to ask something. Yu was surprised and asked what it was. Li looked at him seriously and asked the question, do you think he has the ability? Yu was dumbfounded after the question was asked, as he was very scared. Yu stopped and asked again, what? What is he thinking? Li looked at him and replied that he had been serving on the night watch for 20 years. Does he really think he can't recognize his injuries? He should say, when did he get his powers? Yu lowered his gaze and silently became sad, after which he landed next to his uncle on the sofa and said that this happened half a month ago. Li asked how this happened. Yu turned to him and asked with a smile, is this an interrogation? Li took out a cigarette in his hands and asked him not to worry, but just talk. Yu looked thoughtful and replied that he himself didn't really understand since they woke up suddenly. Li asked again, did this happen on its own? This kind of situation happens extremely rarely, about once a year. Yu stretched out his hand and wondered if it was all thanks to his talent. Li frowned and looked at him menacingly, and he asked in fear whether he was his uncle. Li grabbed him by the shoulder, they sat in silence, and he asked him to relax, and Yu mentally wondered if he activated his abilities. It was already 1:30, and Lai said that this year there will be a test, and everyone must pass the martial arts exam. Yu replied yes, he and Yao know everything. Lai was surprised and asked again, Yao too. In recent years, the Night Watch unit has been under intense pressure and the number of victims is constantly growing. He can give him a backup option. If he couldn't pass the martial arts exam, then nothing bad would happen. Yu got scared and asked again, is there a backup option? Is this even possible? Li replied that he would be able to choose one of several universities to enroll in. Doesn't he like comics? He can enter the art department or something else, no problem. Yu didn't know that Uncle Lai was so cool. He came closer and asked again if he didn't want to enroll. Could he just take the certificate? Li looked at him in bewilderment, then slapped him on the cheek and shouted what he was saying. He will go to Lindong University. The atmosphere there is very conducive, and when he completes his studies, he will get him a stable job, and then he will live happily with Yao. Yu grabbed his head and said his name. Why was he wary? And Yu said that he wanted to try to become special. Li got even angrier and shouted, no, he must obey him. After that, he tried to catch his breath and continued to stand in front of him, pointing his finger in his face. Yu raised his hand and told him no. If he doesn't allow it, he will go to the Night Watch and hand him over. Li asked again with clouding in his eyes, will he pawn him? They stopped and looked at each other for a while, after which he said that he was not joking, because the world of special people is much more dangerous than he can imagine. He should study with peace of mind, and he should take care of everything himself. Yu replied that he was also serious because danger lurks everywhere for them, and besides, he won't be able to take care of him forever, right? Silence formed between them again, after which Li looked away and answered, exhaling, well, okay, he thinks that he will regret his decision. In general, if he wants to transfer, he can contact him at any time. He turned away from him and went to the exit, and Yu asked him not to interfere with him making his dream come true. Li menacingly replied that he was leaving now, but suddenly Yu asked him to wait. He turned around and asked again, what is it? Yu spoke out. Last time he looked at the information that Yao shared. It said that special ones can use all their powers before death so as not to turn into another. Is it possible that a person will still become different, even if he has exhausted all his strength? Li was silent for a while, then answered, of course. A similar situation can arise if a person has special abilities or there were external interferences. Yu replied, okay, then he asked again, but why is he asking about this? Yu scratched the back of his head and replied that it was just a sporting interest. Li put on his shoes near the exit and said that if he chooses martial arts, sooner or later he will have to face all this. Better take a break and stop fighting already. Yu replied, okay, he listens to him. Li added, he almost forgot, this year's tests will take place before the new year. Yu was surprised and asked again, will it happen so soon? He told him to get ready and left the room, and he said, okay. He put his sneakers on the shelf and sat down on the sofa in a comfortable position. He stared at the wall and wondered if he had become different because of his abilities, or due to the influence of something external. The Night Watch must take all people, regardless of what abilities they have. Maybe he made a mistake in something, or someone else has the ability to cause hallucinations. After some time, a notification came to the blonde girl's phone that blogger EU had published a new video. She enthusiastically grabbed the phone and said, "This is an update." She also received a notification from many users who wrote that this was most likely another deception. The Night's Watch kills others with guns, and he's the only one who relies on editing to gain popularity. As he thought, this is another montage, and it's disgusting. These comments were located under the video. There were 1,847 of these comments in number. Also, 210 people liked this video. The girl got angry and said, "Lately the number of haters has increased significantly. They're just jealous of his skills. Now they'll see how long they can last." She is very annoyed by what is happening, and she wrote her angry comment that they don't understand anything. That's why they write these words, that it's just a montage. Her fingers touched the keyboard with incredible speed and a roar of anger. She silently looked at the screen, after which she said that he was definitely not a liar. Otherwise, he wouldn't be releasing videos like this. The loss was visible in the video. There was also an announcement under the video that breaking the law is prohibited on their platform. Incitement, fraud, and other acts of this nature will be severely punished. If you don't kill, then you can die. EU took a step towards the cliff and became wary. The girl saw what was happening and thought that it was pretty cool and a beautiful view. She followed every step and became completely immersed in the video. Suddenly, there was a bright flash of light and he jumped off the building. The girl did not understand what was happening and screamed in fear. Tears appeared in her eyes when suddenly she opened them and looked questioningly at what was happening, holding both hands directly to her. He turned to the side and she looked lovingly at his face and thought, "Cool. Are these the powers of the special?" He took the blow directly on his stomach, spreading his arms, and a bright flash of light illuminated everything around him. The leg of a terrifying monster appeared near his stomach, and the girl said, "Different. This is true." EU extended his hand, holding several fingers and using a certain magical technique, rose up and looked into the distance. Meanwhile, the girl continued to watch him and thought that he was incredibly handsome. She moved away and watched the fierce battle from afar. EU kicked the monster right in the face and continued to beat it with all his might. The girl clenched her hands into fists and wondered, "This is so exciting. Is this a real battle between the special and the different? Everything is real. It is impossible to fake this, and there can be no mistake in it." EU jumped from the roof of the building directly at the monster and looked at him questioningly, after which the realization came that he was really a killer from Beidou. A moment later, there was a loud crash, and the monster was completely destroyed. The green liquid left over from the monster was dripping from her hands. He stopped next to the destroyed creature, pointed his magical palm at it, and spoke, biting the shadow. The girl watched what was happening silently standing behind him and wondered if he had really absorbed someone else. All because he had previously absorbed another spider. Did he get a new ability? After some time, he threw his things into the laundry basket, stopped in front of the mirror, and, looking at the wound on his face, said that he was in quite a lot of pain. He tied a bandage around his body and said, "Others in this area are very strong, and if they were not injured, he is afraid that he would not have survived." Suddenly, a notification came to his phone. He turned around and again saw a video of a man under the nickname Earthly Tao, who greeted the listeners and said that today they would watch the video blogger EU again. This time, everything looks more realistic, but nothing can pass by from his eyes. As they can see, the other is seriously injured. Others in this state are very weak, and therefore even an ordinary person can deal with them. He pointed to the monster's limb and continued his indignation, asking whether someone special would pay attention to such weaklings. You silently looked at the screen and decided to close the video and turn off the phone, thinking that the fight was not very pleasant, and he agrees, but he is very angry. He lay down on the sofa again, leaned back, and thought that his current strength was not enough for something more. He silently closed his eyes when he suddenly opened them sharply and realized that he had to become stronger. So much stronger that no one else dared to doubt him. For complete determination, he clenched his hand into a fist. The system showed characteristics, shadow attribute, shadow glasses 32 out of 32. Man, stalker, killer. Stalker, shadow bite, shadow pupil, shadow shape, and decapitation, shadow claw, shadow walk. Killer, mark, chase. Life expectancy 12 days, estimate, looks strong, but is actually weak. He reacted to this with his silence, after which he grabbed the system window directly into his hands and tried to crush it with incredible strength and anger, not understanding why he was considered a weakling. Yes, he could have endured 200 yayao and 15 uncles. He returned to the couch and continued to think that his current abilities were not enough, and he needed to become stronger. Thanks to these battles, he acquired new skills. First of all, regarding the shadow points, he thought it was an experience bar, but it was sort of like an energy indicator. It takes about 3 points to use the shadow thread and shadow pupil. Decapitation, marking, and chasing have varying degrees of usage. A magical light appeared in his hands. He picked it up and said that the shape of the shadow depends on the environment. For example, in the shady layer, consumption will be low. If you simply go into the shade, then consumption will be assessed as average, and in sunlight it will be high. He grabbed the magical spark in his hands and thought, by the way, the test will take place very soon. He went out onto the balcony in his slippers, looked into the distance and said, but even his current strength should be enough to scare them away. Everything should work out for him, but a lot of problems may arise, therefore restraint. This is not about him. He will give it his all. He understood the thumbs up and continued shouting with incredible self-confidence that in any case his uncle would be for him. What should he be afraid of then? He laughed loudly, and the neighbor, who was watering flowers on the balcony on the floor below, was dumbfounded by what he heard and looked up in bewilderment while he said that he would definitely be happy and continued to laugh. The neighbor expressed dissatisfaction that he seemed to have simply lost his mind. After some time, he found himself in a public place and sat down on a bench next to a plump guy. He was waiting for Yao from the store with her friend and said that they were liars. Didn't they say it would take an hour? They've been here forever. He approached a plump fellow classmate and said that if he continued to waste his life like this, he would not last even a few days. The guy asked him not to joke like that on the eve of the new year, since it was unfortunate, to which he replied that he was not joking at all, and if he didn't kill, he would die himself. The guy got scared and asked him what he was talking about. Yu smiled and answered nothing, after which he turned to the girls and said that they had already arrived. Yao asked him a question, what will they eat? The girl with green hair asked, maybe salad? Yu asked them with delight, what could be tasty in the grass? He suggests going to a cafe that students really like. After some time, they found themselves in a cafe where the menu included dishes such as garlic oysters, steamed oysters, fried peri onions, and similar dishes. The girls looked at this in bewilderment, and the formidable Yao asked him again, is this the cafe that students like? The green-haired girl answered, yes, she thinks that this is more of a cafe for guys. Yu looked at the menu and told the waiter that he had recently been injured and therefore needed to make up for lost time. It's toast, soy sauce fried rice, egg soup, and it's a wonderful dish. The waiter replied, writing down all his wishes, okay. Yao looked at him again with a grin and asked again, what? All these dishes are ordinary. And she thought that he would choose something special. He replied, slamming the menu shut, that she was right, the dishes were really ordinary, so he invited the waiter to give him bigger and fresher oysters. The waiter was surprised and asked him again, what? Yao remained silent, in a state of shock. After some time, the waiter brought their dish and wished them bon appetit. Yu asked Yao not to be angry and served her one dish, asking her to take it. She turned away with dissatisfaction and replied that she would not take anything. Suddenly, a message came to her phone. The martial arts exam will be held earlier. The testing will begin on February 17th and end on the 20th. A special training camp will open on February 25th. Her friend wondered what it was. Martial arts exam? It is necessary. Their friend also saw this notification and said that this would happen ahead of schedule, which is very troublesome. Yu patted him on the shoulder and asked him not to worry because his qualifications were not enough, for which the guy thanked him. After that, he said that, as they may know, at the age of 7 he was greatly frightened by someone else, and by the time this was destroyed he had developed a mental illness. Yu grinned and said, deceivingly, that he would immediately deal with this creature. Yao grinned and asked again, does he think that everyone is the same as him? Most people would run away in situations like this. Even if everything feels normal, others still won't go away. There were many uneaten dishes left on their table, and Yu and Yao looked at each other. Suddenly, he spread his arms and said that he was offering them a drink. He took a glass of water and said that now they would drink, but before he could finish speaking, everyone who was present jumped up from their seats at the loud sound and looked around in fear. Yu also turned around and Yao said that it was a pollution sensor siren. As the other entered the shopping center, many people inside were dumbfounded at the terrifying sound. The man shouted to everyone to run away from here, and people rushed to the exit in panic and asked each other to let them through. Someone shouted to the people in front to go faster and asked if they really wanted to die. The other one is here. It's already here. Stop yelling. You need to be calmer. During this panic, only Yao with Yu and his friends remained standing and watching what was happening. Guy spoke with horror. No, there are too many people and they can't get out of here. The green-haired girl asked what they should do then. Yao replied, first of all, she thinks that they should remain calm and slowly move towards the exit. That's how. Yu suddenly punched the wall and created an incredible hole, which greatly surprised Yao. She crossed her arms in front of her when she saw the fragments flying, and Yu asked what they were worth. They need to get out of here as soon as possible. The guys rushed to run to the new exit that he had just created with his hands, while he carefully and cautiously looked around. Suddenly, he saw one person running away, who with alarm in his voice shouted that it was someone else, and continued to head in the other direction from the bright red glow. Yu became alert and realized that the monster was right here. There are too many people here, and if he reincarnates, then everyone will see it. He immediately grabbed the frightened Yao by the hand. They found themselves inside the crowd, and many people were trying to catch their breath from horror. Someone shouted at them to run away. Yao turned around and said that there should be barriers near the shopping center. Where could someone else come from here? Yu replied that he thought it was too late to talk about it, and all he had to do was run away from here. Fortunately, they discovered this more or less in time. He pointed his finger to the side and someone said, "Hurry up, that's where the exit is." When the whole group of guys arrived there, he stopped abruptly and became wary. Everyone looked around in fear and Yu screamed, gritting your teeth, "Be careful, they must hold on to it." Suddenly Yu grabbed Yao by the hand and the floor under them split into small pieces. They all held on to each other and together began to fall into the unknown and scream for help. Yu rises heavily to his feet and notes that he is in pain. Looking ahead, he clarifies, "Are the others okay?" Lu Yao, rubbing his chin, explains that everything is fine, just scratches. Suddenly, a desperate cry from the brunette is heard. How it hurts him, his leg is pinched. He sits on the ground while she lays a concrete slab on his leg. Hugh immediately runs up to him and, grabbing the iron rod sticking out of the stove, calms him down. He should not be afraid, now he will help him. After that, he picks it up with ease. The guy's leg is injured, and he groans in pain. Yu throws the stone aside while Yao gives him some pills and explains that he should eat this, then he will feel better. He swallowed the pills and asked in fear what kind of place this was. Why did it become so dark? She answers, confused, that she doesn't know. She had never been in situations like this. Yu touches the ground with his palm and explains that it seems to him that they are on some floor of the shopping center. He needs to figure it out. His palm is enveloped by dark energy streams, and he understands it can't be. What a familiar sensation. The entire floor was dragged into the shadow layer. Painful screams of people are heard all around. The leg is injured. A little girl, wiping her tears, tells her dad that she is scared. A man trying to calm her down and telling her not to be afraid. People from the night watch will soon come to save them. Yu, looking around, notices with irritation that there are too many people here. There are no means of transportation in the shadow layer, so it will take a lot of time for the night watch to get here. If they stay here for a long time, they will be exposed to a large amount of pollution, if not otherwise. He must get everyone out as soon as possible. Having thought everything over carefully, Yu turns to Lu Yao and asks, "Isn't she wearing the watch her father gave her?" She immediately looks at them and notes, yes, she almost forgot about it. Pressing her finger on the dial, Yao explained that this watch can transmit a signal for help, so people from the night watch will come faster. The green-haired girl exclaimed joyfully, thanks to her they were saved. At this moment, Yu continues to think hard. He doesn't know how this can speed up the arrival of the squad, but the watch is definitely capable of resisting pollution. Others can attack at any moment. They must not let their guard down. He barely manages to activate his shadow abilities when suddenly the floor is attacked by others. People scream in panic, monsters. Yu, gritting his teeth, understands that it has come. His classmates are screaming in panic, what's going on? But he resolutely looks forward when suddenly something falls down. Lu Yao coughs from the clouds of smoke rising into the air and, sitting on the ground, shouts, Xiaoxiao, Liu Yuqiang, Zhang Yu. Xiaoxiao immediately approaches her and, hugging her shoulders, replies she is here. Yao again tries to see something through the smoke and continues to ask Yu, where is he? Yuqiang, also sitting near the wall, asks where they are. He doesn't see them. Suddenly Xiaoxia shouts to her she must see this. Pointing to a crevice in the ground, she asks in confusion, he couldn't have fallen through there, could he? There is devastation all around. The white-haired girl climbed heavily forward and, crawling out from under the rubble, said she was in great pain. Sitting down on the ground and looking around, she wonders what happened. Then she puts her hand to her head and remembers, by the way, she went out with Xiaoya. And then the alarm sounded and everyone suddenly ran. She begins to turn to the sides and scream, where is she? Suddenly one of her hands bumps into something. Looking to the side, the girl sees Xiaoya's mutilated corpse. She begins to tremble, her eyes fill with tears. She stutters and says, how can this be? At that moment, another appears behind her and swings a claw. The white-haired girl turns around in bewilderment and wonders, is she going to die? She never would have thought that she would end up in the plot of one of the films. But at this time, the hero comes to save the heroine from the film. In real life, this is impossible. No one will save her. Closing her eyes, the girl understands that in reality there are no heroes. Suddenly, there is a blow and drops of blood fall onto the stone ground. Opening her eyes, she sees a dark silhouette and breathes heavily. Wiping her tears, the girl looks up in surprise and sees Jong-yu, who easily holds the monster's claw. She asks hopefully, is he a hero? Yu throws the other into the abyss. The white-haired girl, looking closely, says it's him. System shows a notification. Shadow Claw works in conjunction with the assassin's ability, increasing the lethality of hits. He activates the skill and suddenly jumps up, approaching the monster. Jong-yu attacks it with a large claw, throwing it aside, but it uses its claw to stop and breathe heavily. The girl screams enthusiastically, is this a dream? It's true, yo. Yu notices her clapping her hands and runs up to him, taking photos of him and holding his hand exclaims, she is his fan, she watches every video. How handsome he is. She likes him so much. But Yu notices in confusion that the girl's tights and dress are torn. She shyly steps aside and asks, she doesn't like it, where is Yu looking? But he explains that it's nothing special, he just decided to remind her of it. Suddenly the girl says friendly, but if he doesn't like the way she looks, then she can run home and change into new clothes. Hearing this, Jong-yu swallows his saliva with pleasure and clarifies, right? Even tights? She confirms with a smile, of course, everything is for him. The other one looks at their dialogue with bewilderment and begins to growl menacingly. Noticing this and taking a serious look, he adds, well, it seems now is not the time for this. Then he abruptly jumps up and says, and now the hunt has begun. Another looks around, feeling confused, trying to find Jong-yu, who suddenly disappeared from sight. Suddenly something hits the back of the monster's head. He, sitting to the side, tightly clutches the tourniquet with which he just hit it. Then he flies forward with the intention of grabbing someone else, but it dodges, and then he lands on the ground. The monster falls behind him with a disgruntled roar. Yu notes that they don't have much strength and agility, otherwise he would already be dead. He runs forward again and shouts that he will do it again. Concentrating, he crosses his arms to repel the other's attack. Stopping, Jong-yu sees two more monsters and notes that he will have a hard time. A white-haired girl, filming what is happening on her phone, joyfully shouts to him that she wishes him good luck, yo. If he wins, she will wear stockings for him. Hearing this, he instantly blushes and replies, everything is for their sake. Then Yu rushes to attack, but he has to dodge another blow. Having landed and looking up, he notes that it has risen into the air. Then, using his claw, he shoots a blue rope that binds the other's claws. Jong-yu rushes by and uses claw swings to kill it. Turning around, he asks with a satisfied smile, do they want to kill him? They won't succeed. Suddenly one of the monsters hits him on the shoulder, causing him to bleed. Yu jumps sharply to the side and, clutching his wound, is perplexed, have others begun to work together. The two are held back while they attack. If this continues, he will have no chance of winning. He must think of something. Yu addresses one of the monsters while shooting a tourniquet at it. But it skillfully dodges, and Jong-yu frowns and wonders, did it notice? The next moment, three others rush straight towards him. They, surrounding him on three sides, deliver blows that Yu tries to dodge. But he realizes with disappointment that they are not letting him go into the shadows. His vital indicator is gradually decreasing 89%, 78%, 56%, 45%. He realizes that he cannot continue in the same spirit. Jong-yu still repels the attacks and, running forward, notes that he must lure the enemies. But one of them hits him in the back again, and his life stat drops to 35%. Yu says decisively, the mark must start the chase. He remembers from the last battle, the duration of the mark was extended by 3 seconds. During this time, the chosen goal will cease to be comprehended due to fear. The time count begins 8 thousandths of a second, 10 thousandths of a second, 12 thousandths of a second, 22 thousandths of a second, 26 thousandths of a second. Jong-yu strikes others, killing them. Approaching one of them from behind, he exclaims, beheading. The timer shows 30 thousandths of a second. Finally, the battle ends and Yu rises above the slain other. The system notifies him of the chase assessment. It was a success. The shadow form becomes more powerful. When using this ability, the consumption of shadow points is reduced. Since the shadow absorbs the atmosphere in the shadow layer, the speed of experience recovery and the collection of shadow points increases. He uses recovery because he has a deep wound on his back. Looking at the activated claws on his hands, he thought of something and said, now it's their turn. The two remaining monsters approach him. Jong-yu's vital stat rises to 55%, and as a deep glow emanates from him, he asks what's the matter. Didn't everything go according to their plan? Why don't they continue? Then, abruptly taking off again, he adds, if they don't attack, then he will. But suddenly bright rays appear nearby, rushing upward. Yu stops and wonders, what is this? Where does the light come from in the shadow layer? While blue discharges are emanating from him, he thinks it's strange. Why did he have a strong desire to go there? Others, also noticing the light, immediately head there and growl loudly. At this moment, members of the Night Watch appear, led by Commander Song Kingen, in whose hand is an ever-burning torch. After use, it emits a soft glow that dispels shadows. This can be used as a light source. He extends one hand forward, from which green streams emanate. Kingen silently points to Jong-yu, who, a little scared, asks what. Afterwards, he shouts there that he will figure everything out. At this moment, a monster approaches Song Kingen, but without even turning around, he kills it by sending a green stream of energy upward. Yu, seeing this, notes, one at a time, is this really the power of the Night Watch? If it had hit him, it seems he would have disappeared that very second. Further, he approaches one of the squad members and says with a smile, the guys came late, he almost won. The man in black glasses apologizes for the delay. Is he okay? Jong-yu replies that it doesn't matter, as long as they take care of her. With these words, he points to the side at the white-haired girl, who, confused, asks what. She must stay. Wasn't Yo planning to bring her home? But he, saluting, says he was joking, people from the Night Watch always put work first. Almost disappearing into the shadows, he adds that he leaves the girl to them. The man looks down with Kinnan in shock as she screams for him to stop. Song Kingen turns to the man with glasses and asks if they have a person with that name. He explains that this presenter is very famous on one platform. He uses the power of the shadow. But he is not very strong, it seems, somewhere on the first level. Kinnan frowns and asks again, level 1. He has a torch in his hand. Where do the shadows come from? The guy disappeared in front of so many people. Is he really on the first level? After looking at the girl, who was lying and sobbing loudly, hitting the ground with her fists, he added, okay, they should bring her home. And then they will check this Yo. Lu Yao, making his way through many corpses, fearfully asks, where is Jong-yu? He must answer her. Illuminating the road with the watch dial, she stutters, nothing bad could happen to him. Suddenly his voice is heard, he is here. Yao turns around in bewilderment, and Yu, covered with a pile of stones, asks her to help. He feels as if he is about to be torn apart. She immediately runs up to him and shouts that he should wait a little. She will immediately remove the stones. He grabs her hand and continues to scream. He can't do this anymore. She has to get him out. Lu Yao, grabbing his hand, asks how did he even get here? So you could have died. But when she easily pulls Jong-yu out from under the rubble, she touches them and notes that these stones did not put any pressure on him at all. He says with an embarrassed chuckle, it seems he could have gotten out on his own, he just couldn't move. Afterwards, she examines his back and asks where he got such a wound. Also from a stone? He again replies that he doesn't know, maybe. But mentally, he still answers her, it's not from the stone, but someone else tried. Yu turns around and asks, by the way, where are Feng Xiaoxiao and Liu Yuken? She explains with a smile that the Night Watch came to the rescue, so they were taken away. Then he clarifies, did she stay to find him? But Yao turned away embarrassedly and crossed her arms over her chest and answered, so what? If something happens to him, how can she then look his uncle Lai in the eyes? He falls silent, not expecting such words. Tears appear in his eyes, and he abruptly hugs her. Lu Yao is very surprised, but then begins to beat him and shouts, what is he doing? He must let her go. Jong-yu lies without letting her go. He just saw huge others with blades. They were so ugly. How scared he was. It was better for them to stand like that. But she is still dissatisfied with this and exclaims that she will kill him now. Suddenly a voice is heard from the side, and they immediately turn around. A green-haired girl with a lantern in her hand approaches them and clarifies she heard screams, are they okay? Lu Yao immediately pushes Yu away, explaining that everything is normal. He also adds, everything is fine. The girl chuckles with emotion and explains, great. Now they can go, she will lead them to the exit. Suddenly Zhong screams, and Yao immediately asks worriedly, what's the matter? He smiles with tears in his eyes and says, it's okay. At this moment he realizes that he completely forgot to absorb the others. Shadow points, his cute shadow points. The next day, in the Night Watch building, in a room illuminated by a bright lamp, a stern female voice is heard, what is his name? Yu briefly replies, Jong-yu. The blue-haired girl continues to write down his answers and asks how old he is. He answers again, he is 18 years old. While their dialogue is being recorded, she asks if he is going to university this year. Yu repeats, yes. Then she explains that the consequences of this incident are not that great, but they are there. Some required psychological help. The duration of treatment will be about a month. Night Watch member Lai Yuan crosses his legs also notes, and if martial arts tests are taken during this period, the score will be reduced. But Yu replies he thinks he's fine. Does he have to do therapy? She explains that the process of pollution can occur hidden. Sometimes it is too late to do anything, so treatment is mandatory. He clarifies, then he has about 10 days before the exam. Yuan reassures him he doesn't have to worry. Many similar situations also happened in past years, so the Night Watch has developed a special policy in this regard. Interested person can apply in advance. Jong-yu clarifies in advance. She places a statement in front of him and tells him to contact his parents or guardians. They must sign it. Preliminary testing is carried out during night patrols. The results are also entered into the system. Everything is just like an exam. The testing equipment is also exactly the same, open and impartial. Night Watch will guarantee safety in case of unforeseen situations. Jung-yu calmly explains that his guardian is his uncle. He also works on the Night Watch. Then Lai Yuan adds that this simplifies everything. He must say his name. He says, it seems he works in the main department of the 1st District. He is a civilian, and his name is Lai Zhongyuan. Hearing this name, Yuan leans towards him repeating Zhongyuan. He answers, confused, yes. Then she asks him again, is he sure that his uncle is an ordinary civilian? Jian-yu clarifies what, is not it so? Although he wasn't fired, he didn't do anything. She immediately reassures him, of course not. Then putting the documents in a folder, Lai Yuan says that he will take him to his uncle. He must follow her. They soon enter a large 3-story room with a glass-domed ceiling. Passing by racks of military uniforms, weapons, and holograms, Yuan adds that he should follow her. Yu eagerly tries to look at everything and answers, okay. At this point he wonders, is this their headquarters? Looks unusual. 2 military men pass by them. A guy with green hair asks, no, isn't he a member of the Night's Watch? Another soldier next to him replies, yes, multiple checks have been carried out. They have not had you since the beginning of the century. Jung-yu heard this and opened his eyes wide. Yuan, noticing his reaction, clarifies what's the matter. But sheepishly scratching his head, he explains, it's okay, it's his first time here, so he's a little worried. But he also thinks there was a problem. They started checking him. She approaches the door and announces that he should not worry and rest here for a while. She'll go see Inspector Lee for now. Entering the room and looking around, he is very surprised. What? Lu Yaoyao and Feng Xiaoxiao are also here. Yaoyao abruptly stands up from her seat and asks, is it true? Did the girl see you? She proudly replies, of course, he also saved her. Yu, looking at the white-haired girl, wonders why she is here too. This is the same problem. Lu Yaoyao quickly turns to him, points to the chair next to him and says, has he come? Then he must sit down. After that, she turns to her again and clarifies, well, will she continue her story about Yo? She explains that she saw him fight 10 monsters at once. He looked very calm and relaxed. He killed everyone in an instant. Just at the moment when others could no longer move, the Night Watch arrived. But he disappeared into the shadows, leaving the laurels. Jung-yu, listening to her story, thinks she shouldn't exaggerate so much. After looking at her stockings, he notes with a smile that she has excellent taste. Yaoyao, after listening to her, thoughtfully says, by the way, who is this Yu? They say he is not a member of the Night's Watch. The girl raises her finger and says, it seems to her that he is a student like them. She clarifies, is he a student? Where does this information come from? The white-haired girl, taking a strand of hair in her hands, finds out that this, of course, is indicated by his words and actions, as well as her intuition. Most importantly, he is simply in love with a girl's legs, especially if they are not covered, just like hers. Basically, he's like this guy. With these words, she points her finger at Jung-yu. He excitedly clarifies, what? Suddenly, Lu Yaoyao runs up to him and, grabbing him by the hair with one hand, swings the other and clarifies, does he want to die? He starts to stutter and gets up when suddenly Lu runs into the office. She asks in bewilderment, Dad? He explains, breathing heavily, is she okay? Did he hear that she had entered the shadow layer? Yaoyao starts sweetly patting Yu's cheek and explains that everything is fine with him too. He adds with a smile that he was just a little hungry. Lu turns around and explains that since everything is fine with them, they can follow him. After a while, they are sitting in a small office. She clarifies, is the situation serious this time? He answers, of course. After all, this is the first time in history that an entire store has fallen into the shadow layer. The victims are still being counted, but it is good that they were not injured. They should have been notified that due to this incident, the test would be administered to them earlier. With these words, he takes a cigarette, but seeing Lu Yaoyao's dissatisfied look, he immediately puts it on the table and says, he will briefly tell you everything. The test is divided into 2 parts. The first is an ability test. The second is a test of willpower. Testing the abilities is known as the initial awakening. Candidates will resist pollution. In this test, the risks are quite low. Mainly the distribution of abilities is based on characteristics. The test of willpower will be their spiritual will. This test will be the key to whether they can become special. Jung-yu, after listening carefully to Lu, clarifies that the key to success is willpower. That is, the stronger the better. He folds his arms on the table and replies that this is not necessary. Some people can even endure the pain of a severed arm, but their qualifications remain mediocre. Others do nothing but play the fool, but at the same time show their best qualities. Willpower lies not only in the ability to endure pain, but also in faith in goodness, resistance to evil thoughts, and tolerance of pollution. In general, everything is quite complicated. Yu raises his hand and asks again, do these points affect willpower? He asks in bewilderment if they have any influence. Why suddenly such a question? Yao says irritably, for example, someone's thoughts are occupied with girl's legs. He is very embarrassed and says, it turns out that she is angry. Lu explains that there are several other factors observed, but these 3 points are the most common. If these 3 points are somehow distorted, the heart is filled with negative emotions, then everything will go down the drain. Zhongyu immediately gets scared and asks why. He frowns and says sternly, evil thoughts will only attract evil. Negative emotions are also partly environmental pollution. And if all this accumulates over a long period of time, then the pollution will eventually become immense. So if there are any negative emotions, then it's time for him to release them. If they keep them in their hearts, then this will not lead to anything good. Yu is seriously thinking about negative emotions, but almost immediately he comes to the conclusion with pleasure, no, he needs to go get a foot massage to cleanse his soul. Lu Yao silently looks at his expression, and Lu, getting up from the table, says, well, they can return after a while for testing. As he approaches the door, he also addresses Zhongyu, by the way, his uncle Lai probably won't be back anytime soon. He had already signed all the documents for him. He smiles in response and asks for forgiveness for the inconvenience. But he says sympathetically, they don't have to worry so much, they can just go with the flow. Yu salutes him and says okay. Yao, adopting a serious expression on her face, also replies she understood everything. After a while, a white-haired girl meets them and asks with a smile, are they back? They approach her, and sitting down at the round table, Lu Yao asks where the others are. The girl points to the side and says that they left with the workers. Then she clarifies why she didn't leave too. She explains that her parents are engaged in business. Just a couple of days ago, they left the city and have not returned yet. She just finished talking to them, so they will sign the papers remotely. Liu Yuqiang's voice suddenly rings out, everyone is here. They turn around and see him in a wheelchair with a splint on his leg, carried by Feng Xiaoxiao. He held a glass of coffee in one hand and exclaimed, this is amazing. They sprayed some kind of product on his leg, and it stopped hurting. Zhang Yu approached Yuqiang and clarified that he had an injury. Does he really want to take the test? Lu Yao also added, does anything bother him? But he enthusiastically told them they don't have to worry. He was told that this would not affect the result. Zioya suddenly added with a sly smile and patted him on the shoulder. They shouldn't look at his self-confident face. He was literally just sobbing in the corner. But he exclaimed indignantly that he was not crying. The door of the room opens again, and young people appear on the threshold. Their faces express great sadness, and the blonde man in front of them even wipes away his tears. Yu, surprised to see them, asked why they were so depressed. Yao answered, looking at them with regret that he couldn't understand. They just want to live a peaceful life. However, after the test, they will most likely begin to show obvious changes. Soon Lai Yuan came to them and announced, okay, since everyone is assembled, they will get down to business. Testing is divided into 2 parts, testing abilities and willpower. The ability test will be assessed in terms of their development potential, destructive forces, and the ability to take advantage of them. Abilities are divided into low, medium, high, and highest. The willpower test is aimed at identifying resistance to pollution. The following colors will be awarded: white, green, blue, purple, red, and orange. In previous years, level 1 abilities were not allowed to take part in the challenge. But this year, everyone, without exception, must participate. Assessment of their potential to become special must be taken into account at all stages of the development of their strength. With enough willpower, they will have the ability to counterattack. But if their willpower is inferior to their ability, they will only be able to become civilian workers. After that, she abruptly slams the folder shut and adds, that's all, they must follow her. While it's daytime outside and fluffy white clouds are slowly floating in the blue sky, people are in the waiting room. Zhang Yu, approaching the glass, saw a man standing in the next room next to something covered with a cloth. Suddenly, a loud voice came from the speakers ordering Feng Xiaoxiao to undergo the test. Frightened, she replied that she was already on her way. The doors opened in front of her, and the voice again added, telling her to come in, she shouldn't worry. Xiaoxiao sadly looked down and then went forward, saying that she was already here. When she approached the man, next to whom there was an unknown object covered with fabric, people in the next room, leaning against the glass, were closely watching her. He abruptly removes the fabric, revealing a huge, sparkling diamond underneath. Then the man in sunglasses announced, okay, they can start. The light above the entrance to the room switched from green to red, and the light around went out. Liu Yuqiang leaned closer to the glass and exclaimed displeasedly, how can this be? Do you have to turn off the electricity? Lu Yayao, also carefully observing what was happening, noted that it seemed like this was a test of willpower. Zhang Yu didn't say anything, she just thought sadly that he was already used to such darkness in the shadow layer. Watching Feng Xiaoxiao, he noted in surprise, "What? Is there a stone on her foot? Does it also glow? Looks like she encountered something strong, right? Will she succeed?" Suddenly, the bright light turned on again, causing people to squint. As soon as Zioya left the room, Yayao immediately ran up to her and hurriedly asked so. Yu Qiang also clarified, did she finish everything? But she shook her head and explained that, unfortunately, she had no talent in willpower. She used to train a lot, but to no avail. He immediately pointed his finger at her and shouted, "What? Does that mean she wanted to be special? Besides, she also trained?" She said shyly, "Yes, but nothing worked out for her. He's glad?" Then the announcement sounded again. Liu Yuqiang was next. He immediately became worried and heading towards the door. Closing his eyes, he began to repeat, he doesn't want to be special. He hopes so much. He doesn't need it. No. Feng Xiaoxiao, looking after him, said with disgust, he doesn't have to worry. He won't become like that. After a while, the red light of the lamp changed to green again, and a saddened Yu Qiang appeared from the door. He said, as if not believing what was happening, he went through it. She screamed in shock, "What?" After that, they sat down next to each other and Xiaoxiao repeated again, upset, she wanted to pass, but she couldn't. He added that, on the contrary, he did not want to take the exam. Yayao, looking at them with annoyance, noted that they were simply unlucky. A voice on the speakers announced that Lu Yayao would be next, to which she took a deep breath and turned to Zhang Yu and said, "Well, she's off." The blindfolded Yayao crosses her arms as streams of red begin to emanate from her. The stone on her foot also begins to emit a bright light. Yu, watching her, notes that her stone became red, while others had it green. He remembers that willpower corresponds to 6 ranks in colors. Red means the 5th rank. The lamp above the doors turns green, and as soon as she comes out, Feng Xiaoxiao immediately asks, "So what? Did she pass?" Lu Yayao, still keeping her arms crossed and looking down, answered yes. Zhang Yu, standing opposite her and laughing embarrassedly, asked, "Is she tired?" It's hard for her to even breathe. But she only explains that when he comes down, he will understand everything. He immediately rushes to her with a hug and says, why doesn't she somehow motivate him in this case? She can do it. But she clenched her teeth and, irritably trying to push him away, told him to leave her alone. The announcement was made again. The next one is Zhang Yu. He runs to the door in a great mood and, waving his hand at her, says okay, then he's off. She clenched her fists and said with a smile, she wishes him good luck. He thanked her without laughing. As soon as he entered the room, the lamp turned red. A man immediately approached him with a piece of paper in his hands and asked, "Is his name Zhang Yu?" He confirmed it, yes. When the man took the application from him and handed him a small test tube with blue liquid, he clarified that he had already awakened his abilities. Yu again answered positively, yes. Then he added that you need to drink it. Suddenly, the man takes his eyes off the sheets and, frowning his eyebrows, exclaims, "What? Has he already awakened his abilities?" Zhang Yu, after drinking all the liquid, repeated, yes, he already talked about this. But he, as if not listening, points to the side at the stone and the blindfold and adds, he won't question him too much. They'd better just start testing his willpower. Soon Yu was standing in the middle of the room with his eyes closed. Suddenly he felt something. The man put both hands on his shoulders and explained that he should not be nervous, go forward. His abilities have awakened, so he will feel his consciousness separating from his body as he moves forward. He doesn't have to be afraid of anything, he can just go. With these words, he pushes him and adds, forward. Zhang Yu starts, but then says something is wrong. He feels as if he is falling into emptiness. A blue shimmer emanates from his body. He lands on the surface of the water and, looking at his hands, says, this is amazing. He doesn't feel the body, but he's still connected to it. Yu makes big jumps and moves through the water. The man watches in bewilderment as he dances and contorts from side to side and exclaims, this is very cool. Cool. But then he sternly tells him not to jump, otherwise his test will be interrupted. Zhang Yu calms down and replies, he understood everything. He begins to run forward towards a large glowing stone and asks, does he need to go there? Is everything too simple? But as he moves forward, he realizes that he is beginning to sink underwater. Yu, widening his eyes in surprise, wonders what is happening. His body becomes heavier, it becomes more difficult to breathe. As he dives deeper, he realizes that something is beginning to influence him. Despair, sadness, anger. But he still concentrates and, gritting his teeth, understands, no, he needs to be resisted. Giant Yu surfaces, at which point Lai Zhengyuan appears behind him and calls out to him. Zhang Yu turns around and is very surprised, uncle. Where is he here from? But he strictly looks him straight in the eyes and says, he is not special. He will only hurt others if he continues. Yu immediately starts running away and screams, no, it's an illusion. He's not his uncle. But looking ahead, he sees it again. Zungyun appears right in front of him, repeating, must understand that he is not capable enough. Mountains and rivers have been destroyed, others are rampaging everywhere. He also understands everything. He can live a happy life, so why should he engage in such nonsense? Special is not about strength, but about will. Yu bypasses Lai Zungyun's copies and runs forward. They repeat with one voice, but is he accurate, or will he be able to follow the example of the special ones? A huge monster appears ahead, from which a red glow emanates. It destroys everything around, stones fly up from the blows. Zhang Yu watches as the other towers over the city, corpses of people falling from the sky. He screams in horror and covers his head with his hands. Unexpectedly, Zungyun clicks the lighter and, lighting a cigarette, says, this is the end of the special. Does he really want to be like them? At this moment, another copy of Lai Zungyun appears next to him and adds, he should not be deceived. Because in reality, he just wants to be the center of attention. Copies keep appearing and saying exactly that. Just like countless teenagers have dreams of being superheroes, staying in bed, no getting up early, having fun, being loved by girls. Teenagers say that they don't like it when older people try to lead a sweet talk. They are individuals who have their own thoughts and goals. They feel that they are destined for something more. They are different from others. They like to be assertive, to strive for more. They don't have much ability, but they crave a lot of things. On the tree, he also understands that he has nothing special. It's just youthful maximalism. Yu covers his head with his hands and falls to his knees as the copies around him continue to laugh. Suddenly, somewhere in the distance, a fiery flame appears. Linmo approaches him and says he understands that the dark side of this world is by no means a shadow layer. Even if there is a bright scorching sun above his head, there will always be something that he cannot see. This will be the hidden world. There's nothing beautiful about it, it's not a fairy tale. Zhang Yu reaches out with his hand, but Mo dissolves and his torch falls into the water. Terrible monsters appear around again. Zungyun's voice is not heard, a cataclysm. If he becomes special, he will have to reap the fruits of his decisions. And now they will return to the original question, can he become special? Yu, trying to control what is happening, clenches his teeth. At this time, he is actually in the room. Song Kingen is watching him with his arms crossed. A green-haired girl enters the room and asks, well, he just answers, nothing special, this guy was just walking in circles. She notes that this is normal. After all, not everyone can bear the pollution he inherited. Kinen agrees, yes, but only people with high tenacity can advance. And Zhang Yu's goals are not so clear to them. The girl looks at him sadly, but suddenly screams, the stone has turned red. He is not perplexed and asks what. The room really fills with red. The large stone gradually becomes brighter. Song Kingen looked at the stone on Yu's leg, thinking in disbelief, this can't be. There's something wrong with this. He must be rank 5, but it doesn't look like much. The girl touches his shoulder and clarifies, maybe this is the 6th rank. Kingen frowns at her and answers, he doesn't know. After all, over the decades, only a few people had reached rank 6. Zhang Yu starts to walk forward. He notices this and cannot understand what is wrong. The light is fading. Running up to the control system, he orders the girl to quickly check his watch for abnormalities. She comes closer to Yu and notifies that there is nothing unusual. All indicators are normal. Song Kingen watches as he gets closer and realizes that this is impossible. The closer he is, the more powerful his willpower will be. The light of the stone fades and turns white. He pronounces notes. His willpower weakens. How can it be? Zhang Yu moves forward with small steps and, stretching out his hand, almost touches the stone. Kinen, looking at this and not understanding what was happening, said, is this some kind of joke? Does he want to touch it? Even a person with rank 6 willpower is not capable of this. But it is at this moment that Yu finally approaches the stone and places his hand on it, while a bright yellow glow emanates from it. A black funnel appears in the sky. Zhang Yu continues to hear a voice that addresses him. He should not become special. He must think about his life and friends, about the person dear to him. Lu Yayao appears in front of Yu and extends her hand to him with a warm smile. He takes her hand and the voice announces that he must make his own choice. He looks forward and finally says, that's enough. Everything around seems to turn into glass and shatter into fragments. Zhang Yu finds himself back in the testing room and adds, the voice should stop crackling in his ears. Is this some kind of temptation? Maybe he will succumb to this already? In the magic space, Uncle Lai stopped in front of Yu and Yu, spreading his arms, said, to be honest, at the beginning he was taken by surprise, and he even thought about it. Indeed, initially he just wanted to look like a hero in the faces of others, and he didn't care about the rest. But in this world, there were no superheroes, only ordinary people who were able to achieve success. It was their dedication to their work that brought stability into the world, and one day he already enjoying the peace. He reached out with his hand to the torch, and the whole area was illuminated with bright rays of light, and he agreed that he no longer wanted to hide behind the backs of others. He raised the torch even higher and announced with complete confidence in his abilities that he wanted to light his own flame. Zhengguang looked at him with concern, and Yu said that he really wanted to illuminate the darkness. After these words, only silence and drops of water were heard throughout the entire area. After some time, his assistant approached Lu with documents and said that the incident with the shadow layer affected the second, third, and fourth floors of the shopping center. The fifth floor, although not completely, was also damaged. As for the people, about 850 people were involved. Among them, about 700 were trapped in the shadow layer, and more than 650 were rescued, but the search is still ongoing. A total of 30 students gather to take part in the martial arts exam. For early testing, several groups will be selected and a contamination check will be carried out. Lu turned to his bespectacled colleagues sitting in front of the computer and asked what the pollution department said. He replied that the results were ready and he sent it to him. The message was indeed sent. Shadow species, codename Wandering Spirit, pollution level 1. The three spirits are very similar in terms of morphology, bones, and tissues. Traces of human product were also found. After this news, Lu frowned, and his assistant began to shout that this was impossible. After all, everyone has their own individual traits, and during mutations they change greatly, and these traits could not be distributed immediately between three others. Lu lit a cigarette, went to the window, and said that it looked like something was happening in Beidou. Some creatures hiding in the dark can no longer sit still. Suddenly, a bright beam of light appeared in front of his face, and he looked at it questioningly, spreading his arms. The cigarette fell out of his mouth, and he realized with horror what was happening there. And this is the testing room. He quickened his pace and shouted to be allowed to pass, apologizing to passers-by. He understood that the best result of the willpower test was an orange light. There was never any talk of gold. What happened? He approached the testing room, opened the door, and a guy ran up to him and said in bewilderment, "Captain Lu." The employee pointed her finger towards the stage and said the name Zhang Yu. Lu asked anxiously, "Zhang Yu?" His face contorted in horror, and he continued to look at the bright golden light emanating from Yu's hand. He opened his eyes, turned around, and saw his loved ones who were silently watching what was happening and looked at them questioningly. After some time, he met Lu in the restroom, who brought him water and asked him to drink it. Yu reached out to the bottle and thanked him for his concern, after which he asked what about Lu Yao and the others. He replied that while he was being tested, they were in the break room and they shouldn't know about what happened. He really surprised him. The fifth level is very good, not to mention the sixth, and he actually created the golden light. Yu grinned and asked again. It turns out that his golden light is legendary, and is it better than the sixth rank? Yu frowned and said in response, maybe so, but it's hard to say for sure. Perhaps such people are being dissected and studied. After hearing this, Yu choked on water, after which he asked with alarm, what did he say? He shouldn't be scared like that. Lu asked with a grin, does this scare him? There's nothing wrong with this. It needs to be studied and someone will definitely take it up. Information about it is sent to an analytical center for study, and it becomes an object of observation. Yu asked what? Is everything really that troublesome? Lu got up from the sofa, patted him on the shoulder, and told him that everything was fine and he would accompany him, but he just needed to go through a few procedures. Yu looked at him silently, then smiled and realized that this was a great opportunity. After some time, he found himself opposite a commission who asked his name and his age. He replied that his name was Zhang Yu and he was 18 years old. The employee asked him what he does in his free time. He replied that he just reads and plays sports. Everything that was happening was observed by many people crowded in the corridor and looking at the screen. They wondered, is this the guy who created the golden light? He looks ordinary, and it's hard to believe that he turned out to be the best. But golden light doesn't always mean genius. Could there be an error in the system? The man asked him what he saw during the willpower test. 3 serious men in suits watched the interview taking place. One of them, who had a thick mustache on his face, said with a menacing look his assumption that something great was coming. Yu answered with embarrassment that he fought with others. At the same moment, he thought that he was very bored, and he did not understand because Uncle Lu had prepared everything for him. Why is he forced to be here? Lu himself asked him a question after seeing them. What was he thinking? He lowered his gaze and sadly replied that he was very excited and thought that he was about to become special. He felt the responsibility on his shoulders, and then he suddenly stopped and became silent, and Lu asked him to continue speaking. He grinned and asked Lu, he has a map hanging on his wall, doesn't he? This question surprised Captain Lu, but he agreed. Suddenly, Yu jumped up from his seat, kicked the table and said, out of 10 of their places, only 5 remained, and he thinks that they are in a rather difficult situation. Everything is not so simple, and he thinks that he needs to find out the truth. Lu watched with bewilderment and wondered what kind of game this guy was playing. What is he even doing? Yu suddenly began waving his arms and saying that then he saw how people in that world suddenly became cold and hot, and it was terrible. He tried his best to light the torch. He stopped abruptly and continued to shout that after this failed, he became the only source of light. He again created a bright glow around his body, and Captain Lu covered his face with his hands. All the members of the commission were silent, and suddenly he turned to them and, with a feeling of shame, apologized for the Zhongyu, who sometimes liked to behave like this. His employees sat next to him with tears in their eyes, and the guy said that he didn't think that this guy's story would be so touching. The girl, also wiping away tears, said that she thought that a happy future awaited him in the night watch. Lu didn't expect to see this reaction at all, and his mouth opened in shock. The guys watching what was happening through the camera said that it was not surprising that he created the golden light. Maybe it was an insight. He is very talented, and there is no doubt about it. Yes, they are no match for him. The man sitting at the computer turned towards Captain Lu with a satisfied expression on his face, and Yu looked away and thought that very soon he should be allowed to go home. He wants to go for a massage. He rose to his feet, and Captain Lu said to Yu, who was scratching the back of his head, okay, he can go and wait for the notification. He asked again, notifications. Lu closed his laptop and replied, yes, about the special training camp. Yu sat on the roof and thought about what was happening. Lu asked him once when they left the building, didn't he ask him not to show himself? Now everyone on the night watch knows about him. Yu scratched the back of his head and replied that he was sorry for the inconvenience. Lu grinned and said, looking at him seriously, that he didn't even know what to say to Li. He doesn't want him to become special and thinks he will start to get angry. Okay, nothing can be changed anyway. He should get back and remember to come to training camp on March 25th. Yu asked again, training camp. Lu replied, such as he will undergo special training for several months, and after completing the training, he will take the martial arts exam, and when he returns, he will not have to mention what happened under Lu Yao. He should go and remember the date March 25th. He took the phone and walked in the other direction, while Yu stood behind him, stunned. Yu continued to sit on the roof. He opened the system window, which informed him that the rest of his life was 20 days. He expressed that several months, starting with the next one, would be lost from his life, and he needed to prepare for it. He must hunt as much as possible to prolong his life. When he stopped on the street and looked in front of him, he became very wary and suddenly saw a monster whose blood characteristics were 27%. The monster, which was illuminated with a green tint, ran at incredible speed in an unknown direction. Yu was delighted at this opportunity and ran towards the monster. Walking in the shade, it can move on any surface. The monster noticed him and was very frightened. Moments later, he used the mark, from which the monster opened its mouth even more and lit up with a bright light. Yu ran up to it and shouted, chase, beheading. As he continued to damage the monster with his magical powers, the system window reported that this was a seriously wounded other who was running, trying to save his life, and did not even count on anything more. But his life was cut short, and he could no longer face tomorrow. The pursuit of the wounded prey was successful, the pursuit was assessed, the pursuit was successful. Remaining life increased, current value is 22 days. Improved combat skills, shadow points +4. Yu knew that fortunately he noticed it in time. Suddenly, someone called him behind him, and he turned around cautiously. When he saw the shadow of a man in front of him, he looked at him questioningly. It was a guy in a red helmet who asked where his friend was. Yu felt uneasy since he had already destroyed this monster, and looking at this, asked again, is it different? The guy took out a club, walked towards him angrily, and shouted, thief! He will pay him. He didn't understand at all what was happening and asked again, a thief? The guy swung at him and shouted that he would stop pretending already. He stole what belonged to him. He avoided the approaching blow with fear, and suddenly the guy realized something and became wary. He stopped abruptly and came closer to the perplexed woman. When he took off his helmet and carefully examined his body, he, with embarrassment, covering himself, asked again, what was he doing? The guy touched his hand and shouted with joy, wow, this is the same one. He saw it online. He is a fan and watches every broadcast. He took out his phone to take a photo and asked him to smile. Yu looked from the cameras in bewilderment, and the guy added to his words, by the way, they had to divide the spoils according to the rules. Yu was surprised and asked what he was talking about. What are the rules? The guy looked at him questioningly and said online that streamer Yu stole the loot of a harmless collector and didn't even apologize. Yu looked at him in fear and shouted to wait, asking what he was even doing. How could he know about this? He hit him on the back with his magical powers, causing the guy to become alert and fall to the ground, groaning in pain. Yu frowned and asked him to explain everything normally. The guy scratched the back of his head and replied that he would listen to him, after which he began to explain that they were freelance employees of the Night Watch, and as soon as he reached the first rank of the middle level, he could join them. EU asked again, what do freelancers do? He raised his hand and said that they didn't earn that much, about 6 or 7,000 yuan. Yu was very surprised and shouted, and in his opinion, this is a little. Suddenly, he saw the remains of the monster shining brightly green under his feet and shouted to the guy to have respect, because he gets much less than 7,000. This is almost his monthly fee for manuscripts. The guy replied that he understands everything, but there are too many risks, and they rely only on themselves and can die at any time. And these are just battered others in the shadow layer. EU remained silent, looking at the remains of the monster, and then asked again, to whom is he selling these others? The guy replied with a smile that this was for the Night Watch, universities, and some companies with suitable qualifications. They give a task to capture a certain species and also send information about the location of this creature. You asked again, so they say where the others are. It is very comfortable. He asked to share his QR code and said that he would come back and add it, and also give 7,000 yuan for another. The guy was very surprised and shouted back, 7,000. 4,900 is enough. EU hugged him and asked him again, how is this so? He can't be so petty. In addition, he wants to chat with him in the future about cooperation. The guy asked him again in surprise about cooperation. After a while, a huge creature appeared, which emitted bright red shades and growled loudly. The system reported that this is a bloody shadow cat, species, blood, shadow. EU clenched his teeth in anger and said, shadow bite. After that, he lifted the monster directly into his arms and thought that he would try to absorb it, but leave the body intact, and otherwise nothing would work. He waved his hand to the guy and said, okay, he can take it. The guy with the rope in his hand replied, okay. He walked closer to the monster, bandaged it, and turned to him, telling him that he was so kind and even willing to share. EU smiled and replied, he also has a responsible job after all. He still needs to find out the location and take the body to the Night Watch. The guy lifted the monster onto his shoulder and said that in fact this work can be done alone if you register. EU was dumbfounded, then turned around and replied that he wanted to maintain confidentiality. What will happen if people from the Night Watch find out about his identity? The guy started screaming, by the way, and he's pretty good and killed 4 others in a day. This is a record. EU laughed and shouted that he could kill 100 if he had time. But the others he just swallowed did not make him stronger, and he thinks that those with the first rank will suit him better. He turned to a guy named Denk and asked him to help find others of the first rank. Denk was very surprised and shouted, first rank? What does he say? It's impossible. They are all extremely dangerous and the risk is too great. EU got angry and answered him through gritted teeth that he knew about it and was going to deal with them. After some time, he found himself in the city, rang the bell and went into his apartment, sighing deeply and saying, finally he came. Yao told him that he was late again. He did not expect to hear her voice and turned around wary. She lay on the sofa with the phone in her hand and said that she had been waiting for him for a very long time. There were cookies on the table that she baked herself and he could try them. He took a bite of the cookie, after which he sat down next to her on the sofa, looked at her legs with embarrassment and asked again where Lu was. She replied that he was on a mission and asked again if he would return today. She answered no. What's the matter? He said with even greater embarrassment that she could stay with him. Yao frowned after these words and hit him with incredible force that a loud sound could even be heard. After that, she frowned and said that during the day she had not had the opportunity to ask how the testing went. With tears in his eyes and a huge wound on his head, he answered that everything went well and asked again, what was it? Yao asked a question, was it successful? What level? He looked into the distance and replied that he thought it was the 3rd, realizing that in fact it was gold, but there was no point in telling her about it. She got closer to his face and asked more questions. What about abilities? Which ones does he have? He looked away and replied, abilities, shadow. She must have heard of such a thing. She exhaled and said, well, okay, this is pretty good. He has good potential and an auxiliary ability, so there's no point in meddling where he doesn't need to. He watched her and wondered if she was really worried about him, and that's why she waited so long for him. He looked sadly into her eyes and asked again, what about her? What about her abilities? She smiled and replied, the spirit is rated as the strongest with high potential. At the early stage, the combat power is not particularly strong, but at the later stage, it is a completely different matter. You looked at her in bewilderment and realized that she had just come to show off in front of him. After that, he lightly hit her on the nose and told her not to simply speak out, which is why she put her fist in his mouth and asked him to shut up. He covered his face, flushed with shame, and looked into her eyes. She moved further away and he asked, by the way, it turns out that they are now the shadow and the guardian of the soul. She answered, clutching her head, that she didn't quite understand this either and only knew that others had the same names. For example, his shadow corresponds to the shadow of another, and its guardian of the soul corresponds to the spirit of another. They need to hunt others without being polluted in order to become stronger, and if he hunts a suitable other, his effectiveness will increase. Yu stuck out his tongue and said that it was quite interesting. Her skill sounds good too. Why don't they show off their abilities? Yao looked at him in surprise and asked, but how to do this? There are no others here. He smiled and said that he could try it on him and not worry, because everything would definitely be fine. She became incredibly embarrassed and shouted that he was offering such a thing. Yao extended her hand towards Yu's face and created a bright glow, looking seriously at his eyes. Her hand approached his eyes and he was dumbfounded, looking at her questioningly, and then fell to the floor. Yao ran up to him in fear, sat down on her knees next to him, and asked if he was okay. He replied that it was painful and asked to quickly stroke his head. She answered in fear, okay, after which she began to massage it for him and asked like this. He answered no, she should try it on both sides and more gently. She asked him again, right? He answered yes, that's great. By the way, she is very strong, and he was ready to defend himself, but still fell into a trap. She blushed from the shift and replied that their abilities came from various others, and it was normal that he could not resist. Moreover, the spirit attacked sharply, and it was not surprising that he did not even notice. He raised his finger up and asked again, did she think that she would become a target for everyone while they were at the training camp? She replied that she was not like him and that she liked assertiveness. She had heard that other strong students from the area would be there. She continued to massage his head, and he asked what levels they would have. She asked not to worry, because they were clearly not much stronger. By the way, he loves massage. I wonder how much he would pay some masseuses. He replied that he could not even imagine this. Maybe several thousand. After these words, there was an awkward silence, and Yao smiled with an eerie look and removed her hands from his head, after which she screamed, do you like the massage? Well then, after this scream, a bright light appeared in the ventilation, and Yu shouted not to approach him and began to ask for help. Meanwhile, in parallel space, the monster was absorbing the unknown object. Yu watched what was happening in the form of I together with Dank. He asked the question, is this another of the first rank? Dank answered yes, he specifically chose the one he had already encountered. Yu jumped off the roof and Dank and asked if he needed help. He answered no, after which Dank saw him fall from the roof and looked at him questioningly. A bright flash of light appeared near the monster, and it hit the creature directly on the ground and quickly destroyed it with one blow. The system reports that the chase is being assessed, and the chase was successful. His shadow threads have been improved, and a new shadow group ability has appeared. The shadow group of his shadow control ability has been improved several times, and he can now expand it. After launching a group of shadows, it releases many threads of shadow in different directions. Dank looked at what was happening in shock and shouted, wow, he's so strong. The pumped-up guy put on his glasses and bright sparks began to glow around him. He landed among many monsters and created a bright flash of light. All this was captured on video. Yao looked at the computer and said, this battle looks so powerful. Lu, standing behind her, said that not all capable people can awaken the abilities that she possesses, and this is very impressive. Previously, there was a person who had already awakened an ability similar to hers. Recording on a flash drive is an early stage of its cultivation, and she should pay special attention to this. Yao looked into his eyes and asked sadly, Dad, he didn't achieve something like this? He replied that it was, but did he do it? And the general knows such people and is well acquainted with them. Yao thought that this was quite strange. Wouldn't this information be useful for Zhangyu? Why is he showing this to her? Meanwhile, Mai Zhongguang was smoking near the window alone. He was alone in a room, on the door of which it was written that it was secret. Room B14256. The cataclysm happened 90 years ago, west of Beidou, 200 kilometers from here. The body was surrounded by a luminous ring that hung in the air. If you don't look at it for a long time, then a person begins to plunge into pollution. Power, ability to willfulness, possession of other knowledge, immunity to most prohibited substances and abilities of others. 2 divisions were completely destroyed during the battle, 3 generals were seriously wounded, and 300 members of the Night Watch were injured. They were successfully taken, after which they began to keep me in custody. Everyone's file is top secret. After a thorough analysis, it was discovered that it was not worth having long-term contact with that creature. The code name for this creature is God. Yu rose up in front of the ominous monster and struck, using his magical powers. A bright spark flew out of his finger and hit the monster, which became alert, feeling the pain, after which it pounced on him and hit him in the face. Dank filmed what was happening on camera and shouted that he wished her luck. After the impact, the blood percentage dropped to 66%. Yu wiped his face with his hand and looked at the approaching monster, after which he took the stick into his mouth and said that it was time to do this. He broke it into 2 parts and imitated the sound of an explosion. The monster opened its mouth in shock, and a moment later, a strong fiery explosion formed in front of it. The system reported that a shadow group produces small explosions in a certain area, either in the air or on the enemy's body. There is a chance to penetrate deep into the enemy's body, and then the damage will be colossal. Dank continued to compliment her and say that it was pretty cool. He thinks this is the part of the video that will make a splash. Yu looked into the camera and replied that it was really well shot. Dank began to collect the remains of the monsters in a bag, while he opened the system window and saw the inscription, Shadow Attribute, Shadow Points 78 out of 78. The remaining time is 47 days. Great, now you don't have to worry about training camp. Yu asked Dank to prepare the next one for him, and he replied that everything was ready. A bright pink monster appeared in front of him, and suddenly a pink arrow rushed straight towards his face, which made him very wary. Yu grabbed Dank by the clothes and moved him away from the approaching magical forces, which made him a little scared and hid behind Yu, who asked who it was. The monster opposite him made some sounds, and suddenly a huge shining eye of this creature formed in front of them. Dank got scared and shouted that this monster has big eyes and is of the second rank. Yu asked with caution, "Is this a spirit?" Yao said that she thought that her soul guardian corresponded to the spirit of another. Yu remembered this and rushed towards the monster, thinking that he should not allow this creature to attack. A bright yellow arrow was aimed at the monster's body and hit the core of the creature's eye. Yu paused and looked in fear at the fallen body of the monster, which had been stepped on by a man's foot. Yu opened his mouth in shock and said, "It's him." Suddenly the man jumped away from the monster and rushed into his hands with a spear, and a note fell right into his hands. He grabbed the piece of paper and began to read silently. Someone asked him if he didn't worry enough about his exams. Does he still want to become special in the family and stand out? Well, then the Chuyin group invites him to their place. He asked again with interest, Chuyin group. Chuyin office. There was a huge statue of the great man in front of the office. Many people crowded around the monument, and Yu also looked at it silently, holding a card in his hands. He recalled how Dank explained to him that Chuyin was the largest pharmaceutical company in Yunhai. If he becomes their employee, then there will be nothing more to worry about, and the future will be secured. Yu asked him back then, "Is this person a Chuyin employee?" He replied, yes, it was visible from the uniform. Yu said that he once said that people like him were at the first rank, and this one, without straining, dealt with others of the second rank. Dank asked again, didn't he know? Chuyin produces dopings that increase their abilities. They cooperate with significant patrols and helped in the development of one product. If he wants to become stronger in the shortest possible time, then Chuyin is the best solution. Yu asked, what about him? Dank asked to forget about it because he is on his own. Meanwhile, the girl on the stage, who stood with a microphone and pointed to the presentation on the screen, spoke out, and so, a new drug codenamed T1928. It was developed by a doctor from Beidou and the gentleman who headed the company for 10 years. This helps increase brain activity and thereby accelerate the development of abilities. Those around were happy to hear this presentation and shouted with delight, and Yu stood and grinned, thinking that this sounded quite tempting. But does this drug work? The girl asked for a volunteer to come out, and suddenly Dank jumped high and shouted, scaring everyone around him that he wanted to go. He intercepted this drug and drank it in front of everyone. Yu was surprised by what was happening and asked again, wasn't it he who said that he was on his own? Dank was delighted and shouted that he felt his brain working. The original price is 8,888 yuan. Today they have a special offer in which the price is reduced to 1,888 yuan. The girl reached out her hand to those around her, and they began to shout that they really wanted this drug and asked to give it to them. Yu turned away from the stage and grabbed his head, realizing that these people could no longer be helped. This room contained many items that were used in battles. Yu stared at the majestic painting of the heroes, which was dedicated to the founder Zhao Chuyin. Yu wondered if he was a member of the Night's Watch. Kingdon, who approached him, said that everything was true, and unfortunately few people remember this now. Yu remembered that he was the man from the Night Watch. In the 50th year of the disaster, others completely penetrated Daju. Mr. Zhao Chuyin single-handedly decided to fight this seemingly hopeless situation and led the mass evacuation and occupied territories. To protect people, he did not hesitate to set himself on fire to destroy all others and eventually burned to the ground, not leaving even bones behind. Fortunately, his descendants increased the numbers of the Chuyin company, continuing to make enormous contributions to the business. To be honest, he looks a lot like Mr. Zhao Chuyin. Yu pointed his finger at himself and asked again, is he really talking about him? Kinnan replied, yes, that day in the Night Watch department, he said that he wanted to become the only light in the pitch darkness. Does he remember this? Yu became wary, scratched the back of his head and said what it was, but he just said it like that, and he believed him. Kinnan continued to say, yes, he is worthy of being relatives of the General Lai. Yu asked who this was. He answered whether it was General Lai Zongguang. You remembered his uncle and shouted in surprise, "Is he a general? Is he the strongest?" Kinin scratched his head in discomfort and asked again, but he didn't tell him. You replied no. He thought he was a simple worker. Kingen said, "He is also a representative of the citizens, but his power is much higher than them." You was silent in bewilderment and thought that now his words about another way out did not seem strange to him, and he thought that he knew some cool people. It turns out that he is himself. Kinin patted him on the shoulder and suggested that it seemed like General Lai was keeping an eye on him and on the sly for his own good. By the way, his name is Song Kingen, and he is an instructor at the training camp. You asked again, instructor. Kinin wished him good luck and said that he liked him and hoped that the training would go smoothly. You took a deep breath, after which they entered the room. You looked around and thought he has some kind of bad feeling about training. Looking at the picture, he saw bright red eyes and shouted, "Who is it?" He looked at the picture again, after which one of the monsters struck not far from him, and he screamed loudly. You rushed to run towards the flying monster, thinking that it was a wandering spirit. How did it end up here? He looked at the emergency exit table and continued to run up the stairs, asking how did he get inside when there were so many guards outside. He was already right on the monster's tail and wondered if it was not that simple. The wandering spirit he killed also had this clue pop up for the first time. It turns out that something is wrong here. The monster ran around the corner, and you continued to ask, maybe the increased appearance of others in their world is connected with something. Suddenly, fear was expressed in his eyes, and he looked questioningly at the disappeared monster, who was no longer in the corridor, and he asked, "The basement of the Chain companies. But why is there no one here?" Someone said, "Number 9 has returned, he can come in." You turned around and asked again, "Is there anyone here?" There was silence all around and complete silence. He didn't understand, maybe he should hide in the shadow layer. What's wrong with this company? He used the pupil of the shadow and reincarnated into EU, who found himself in another dimension and looked into the distance with wariness, where he saw many sealed monsters in different capsules and asked with fear if they were others. And what does Chiang do with them? He took a step closer and heard someone say, "Dr. Yu, the cultivation of the wandering spirit is going as expected and everything is fine." In the morning, Mr. Danzhao said that he would like to take control in a bloody manner. Does he have any ideas? You replied, after all, some are quite difficult to tame, and the 3 wandering spirits were a great example of this. If they forcibly take over the bloody species, he is afraid that they will lose many. But didn't the previous use of flesh and blood to attract the bloody species bear fruit? You replied that it was impossible to rely entirely on it. You continued to stand motionless, and Dr. Yu agreed that their ultimate goal is to develop a controlled other who will help the Night Watch, and to achieve this, they first need to take control of the spirit, and this is how this spirit ended up in their hands after it was rejected by their own. You watched what was happening in horror. Dr. Yu walked up to the screen and greeted monster number 9. This creature made some sounds, and the assistant asked the doctor to be careful. You asked him not to worry and just take notes. He tapped the glass and asked, "How does it feel? Do you like the new eyes?" The monster began to move and straightened its limbs, and you said that this was great, and the mood of this creature was already stabilizing. The next step is to make more number 9s who could fight with others. They need to quickly bring several stones and give them to the 9th. The assistant answered yes. You asked himself if he could see him. It does not look like the wandering spirit he saw before. It is not aggressive and communicates. It seems to have consciousness. The assistant approached the doctor and asked if things continued like this, would it get out of control and fight against them? The doctor replied that he believed that they would solve all the problems that had arisen. The guy suggested trying to conduct further tests, and the doctor asked which ones. The assistant suggested, for example, replacing the soul of someone else with a human one. After this proposal, the doctor attacked the guy and shouted that this was nonsense and went beyond what was permitted. He advises him to abandon this idea, otherwise but before he could finish speaking, he cleared his throat, and Tianming apologized and said that he just said too much and he shouldn't worry so much. You continued to cough and said that you can't even think about something like that. It's taboo. Blood appeared from his mouth and he continued to bleed it, after which he looked at the assistant and said, but the guy adjusted his glasses and answered, "Other people, Night Watch." He apologizes, but this is the end of his research because he came for something else. He raised his hand up and created magical bright sparks in his hand, which he clenched into a fist and directed at the surrounding objects, which began to fly everywhere and break into small fragments. Moments later, the monsters were released. The system began to warn that others had begun to escape from room 35. The threat level was red. Researchers must evacuate as soon as possible. The siren continued to shine brightly and make frightening sounds. The researchers stopped and started shouting, "Room 35. There are dozens of others there. You need to run to a safe place and quickly." Why are they standing? We need to run. Someone could not walk and asked for help. Tianming watched as he ran around with an arrogant expression on his face. His face was half split. He began to fall down and fell to the ground. His blood percentage was 0. EU began to crawl out of the floor and think the student killed the teacher and then committed suicide. What's happening? All the wandering spirits have escaped. Suddenly, the doctor woke up and shouted, "He has come." EU grabbed his body and shouted not to move so that he could call a doctor. Yu said that he had a fiery appearance and continued to repeat this. Yu asked again, "Fiery look?" The doctor's eyes rolled back and he closed them, and he shouted at him to wait and asked him to explain what was happening and not to play these games with him. The doctor lost consciousness in his arms, and he suddenly turned around and saw the attacking monster. He immediately put Yu on the floor, prepared for battle, and said that first he would have to eliminate all the interference. First he would kill this creature, and then continue the conversation. Zhang Yu strikes someone else. Turning around, he sees 2 more, and also directs blue energy discharges at them. Then he steps with all his strength on something dung on the floor, and there is also blood on his shoes. Yu looks around the room and sees corpses of people. He says with tension, "This is bad. Others have gone to the outside world." At this time, it is day in the outside world, and small groups of clouds float in the pale blue sky. The presenter introduces people to a new product. At this moment, monsters appear from the ceiling through the shadows and immediately attack them. People run away in horror and scream, "These are others. They need to run away urgently. They all need to get out of here now. They need help." Dank, trying to calm everyone down, shouts, "This is a bloody sight. People shouldn't worry. They don't just attack. They all need to stick together." The monster is approaching, but he still says that you shouldn't run away. Another one flies towards him from behind, but at that moment he is hit by Zhang Yu, using shadow abilities. Dank, seeing him, exclaims joyfully, "So Yo has come." Yu, fighting off the attacks of monsters, replies, "They better talk later. Now he must help people." But he answers in disappointment, "No, it doesn't work out for him. No one listens." Everyone is panicking. Zhang Yu looks to the side and sees a man running away from the green monster and asking to be saved. He immediately rushes to the rescue and attacks, throwing it aside. Afterwards, he turns to the others. They shouldn't play the fool. If they don't want to die, they must dodge. They must also pay attention to the shadows around them. People should not give others any chance to capture them. People, as soon as they see him, enthusiastically start filming on their phones and shouting, "Is he Yo? Is he an amnesiac killer?" This is true. They are saved. In this case, they will obey him and stick together. Yu seriously adds, "It shouldn't look. If you notice something, be sure to report it." They don't have to worry. Women and children come out first. People group up and carefully stand at a distance from monsters and shadows and begin to scream loudly. They need help. They are in trouble. Is anybody here? Zhang Yu looks around and notes that everything seems to be in order here. He should move on. After that, he jumps up, pushes off the ground strongly, and orders Dank to help the people get out, while he looks at the situation above. He obediently salutes him and says, "Okay." A woman, hugging her little daughter, sits in the middle of an apartment engulfed in fire and desperately screams, "Someone needs to help them." The little girl also exclaims with tears in her eyes, "She is very hot. She wants to get out of here." Suddenly, the front door flies away and someone's silhouette is visible through the smoke. The woman screams with inspiration, "They are here. Here!" But the next moment, she is very surprised when she sees a huge green monster. She covers her daughter with her hands and asks that it not touch them. The daughter also desperately hugs her and screams, "Mom." But suddenly the monster stops in bewilderment and flies off to the side. Zhang Yu appears and pierces the other through with one blow. Landing back on the floor, Yu notes that he was even able to pull his arm out. It falls and the woman sincerely thanks him. Well, he ignites and, jumping on the spot, screams how hot it is. His body is fireproof, then why is he so hot? But after that he calms down and, showing a thumbs up, tells the family that he will help them. They cannot help but be afraid. The girl, frightened, screams that her uncle is even worse than that monster. Mom, picking her up in her arms, asks her not to be afraid. He especially came to help, even if he is a little ugly. Yu takes the girl in his arm and, hugging the woman, explains that they should hold on tight. Then he flies out of the apartment, use his tourniquet. They fly down, and he, being careful, carefully stands on the ground. The firefighters immediately pour water on the burning apartment, and the woman, wiping her tears, thanks him. She is really very grateful to him. The girl adds thoughtfully, she is also grateful to the strange boy. The gathered crowd, suddenly seeing him, begins to exclaim, "Everyone should see this. This is Yo. He saved the mother and daughter." Zhang turns around and walks away as people continue to wave and chant, "Yes, this is Yo. He went to save people again." They wish him luck. He doesn't lose his vigilance and thinks he needs to speed up. Shadow points are spent very quickly. He doesn't know where the other people from the Night Watch are now, but it seems to him that they will come very soon. Suddenly, a bright glow appears behind him. Yu turns around and, looking closely, notes that the people from the Night Watch are already here. Was it really all planned this time? One of the squad members raises his hand with a green cloud of energy upward and, increasing this, extends it forward and attacks the monsters. The rest of the soldiers also continue to fight using their abilities. Soon several monsters lie dead, with limbs torn off and holes in their bodies. But still others appear again and advance, growling loudly. Numerous explosions occur in a multi-story building. Zhang Yu, observing this, notes that the industrial zone of the Chang company seems to be the main target for attack by others. He runs into one of the apartments and continues to think the situation is not the best. There are no people from the night watch here. He can only rely on his own strength. The day is gradually moving towards evening. Yu carries an elderly woman on his back while bystanders shout to him, "He's coming. Yo, help people again." He rushes to the ground, to the people already hanging in the shadow cocoons, to the exclamations of those around him. He helped 3 at once. Then he also lowers the dog to the ground. Eyewitnesses give him a thumbs up and continues to shout, "Yo is very cool." They wish him luck. Suddenly Song Kingen notices him and realizes that it's him again, that mysterious killer. As soon as Zhang Yu lands, he puts the man on the ground and explains that he is the last one. The crowd is walking around them and people are asking, "Is Yo okay?" He seems to be feeling bad. "He's wounded. You need to call an ambulance." Yu, having earned 13 shadow points out of 74, he sighs heavily and thinks how tired he is. Being a hero is very difficult. He would like to dress up to look better, but he doesn't even have the strength to get up. However, it was worth it. Jian Yu looks up and sees the man he just saved tearfully hugging his girlfriend. But next to her, an elderly woman, wiping her tears, fearfully says, "Her granddaughter. Has anyone seen her granddaughter?" It was so high. The man next to her adds, "His son is also missing. Has anyone seen him?" Another man next to him says his daughter is missing. Behind in the crowd, a girl joins them. Her son has disappeared. He is 7 years old. Yu, hearing them, frowns and notes that he didn't see them. Are they really all children? Looking up and taking a closer look, he sees how others, grabbing children, climb up. At this moment, they are desperately screaming, "Dad!" They want to go home. Watching others, Zhang Yu thinks in horror, it can't be. What are these monsters thinking? Why do they need children? Suddenly, he takes out a ringing phone from his pocket. Lu Yayao, sitting on the sofa in his apartment, asks him worriedly, "So, has he already been to Chiang's company?" He starts running forward and asks how does she know. But Yayao sharply shouts that he should not ask her, but come back. Yu finally says that she doesn't have to worry. He will come back when she finishes preparing the beef and tomato salad and egg soup. She doesn't have time to finish when her friend hangs up and rushes to the rescue. The phones ring and Lu Yayao looks at the screen in confusion. At this time, Zhang Yu plunges into the shadows and, being wary, realizes that he does not have much blood volume and shadow points. He needs to hurry. Suddenly, a loud announcement is heard. The special one must listen carefully. He is surprised when Lu seriously says that according to Law 113, non-Night Watch members are prohibited from using their abilities in public. He must stop or they will take action. The soldier points his weapon at him and repeats, "This is the last warning. He must immediately deactivate his abilities." The man frowns, and Yu obediently raises his hands up and answers, he understands. At this moment, he understands that he must forget about the task. It is better for him to leave everything to the Night Watch. They are more qualified, so they can help. But then, turning his head to the side, he sees an elderly woman falling and repeating Gangan, her granddaughter. He looks at it with bated breath and clenches his teeth. He then turns to Lu and sternly tells him to follow him. He is surprised when Zhang Yu suddenly pushes off the ground and, with the help of a jump, flies forward. The military men point their guns at him, but Lu lowers the gun of one of them, to which the man is surprised, "Captain." But he only speaks briefly. They will watch him. Stars gradually appear in the evening sky. Purple traces from others remain in the air. They run away, holding small children with their tails. Zhang Yu follows them and wonders where they are going. Suddenly, the monsters stop, and he, looking out from cover, is surprised. Are they going to the shadow layer? Yu follows the others and continues to observe from the roof of one of the buildings and notes that it is dangerous. If earlier others killed people, now they began to kidnap them. They act in an organized manner. He sees children sitting closely next to each other and crying loudly while monsters guard them. Zhang Yu is thinking, Chiang Company, fire appearance, biological experiments. It seems like he's caught up in something terrible, but it's too late to back out. Thinking about this, he jumps down. One of the monsters carefully inspects the area, when suddenly a stone flies off the wall, and it immediately draws attention to it. Another begins to look up and to the sides. It glances briefly at the crying children behind it, and again a rock falls behind it. It wonders if it's ghosts, and at this moment, it again looks away at the children. But having begun to count them as a claw, others wonder, are there fewer children? Small stones begin to fall on the monsters. One of them turns around and points forward with a howl. Yu grabs the 3 children and runs as fast as he can. but he turns around sharply and says with a smile he was noticed. The monsters are approaching him when suddenly they all fall into the shadow grid and begin to growl with anger. Soon Jong-yu, lighting the way with a flashlight, descends the stairs and tells a group of children to quickly follow him. He also calls the night watch and clarifies that he has several children here. But at that moment his phone explodes and he tries to shield his face from the sparks. Someone appears in front of them. The amphibian man says contentedly he didn't think he would meet a man from the night watch. It turns out that this is the famous Yo. Yu covers the children and, spreading his arms, asks who he is. The man, sticking out his snake tongue, answers can guess. Then he uses his abilities to make friends in the wall. Jong-yu starts to get drawn in and he wonders, does this guy read minds? He is special too. He shoots a shadow rope at the wall of the building opposite and, with a tight grip, lands on the roof. Several iron rods fly at him from behind, but Yu manages to deflect. The amphibian man appears next to him again and notes, that's right, everything is like in the video. His reaction is impressive, but the strength is only at the first level. This did not surprise him. Jong-yu, preparing for a fight, asks, is he from Chiang? The man grins and clarifies, does he think it's similar? Then Yu suggests maybe he is a fire species. But the amphibian man only grunts displeasedly and, shooting a green ball at him, says, the dead don't need to know much. It flies straight towards Jong-yu, but he dodges by jumping to the side. At this moment, the ball approaches him from the other side again. He closes his eyes and a strong explosion is heard, from which he flies to the side. He lies on the ground and sees 2 more green balls flying at him. The amphibian man watches the explosion again and thoughtfully says how boring it is. He thought it would be more fun. Small children are on the stairs at this time. Some of them cry loudly, and some watch the battle and say with excitement, you must not die. The man heads to the site of the attack, but, stopping, exclaims in bewilderment, what? There is no one at the site of the formed craters, and he asks in confusion where. The amphibian man looks forward, trying to find Jong-yu. At this moment, he appears from the shadows behind and slowly approaches, extending more shadowy fingers in his direction. It slaps the man sharply across the cheek as Yu moves right towards him. He smiles slyly and hurries to attack, but at that moment, the amphibian man turns around and, forming a ball in his hand, points in his direction. Jong-yu hides in the shadows while the man angrily shouts that he is an idiot. Finally, Yu leaves in front of him a cloud of shadow energy that expands. The amphibian man looks attentively at this, when suddenly energy shoots from the ball in different directions and tentacles stretch out. They inflict multiple cuts on him, but the man, licking his lips, notes that the guy is hiding in the shadows and attacks on the sly. That in this case, he will teach him a lesson. With these words, he again forms an energy ball and throws it back with his hand. It goes straight to the little girl who is at the hole in the wall. She gets scared and screams she needs help. At this moment, Jong-yu appears in the shadow portal and tries to resist the enemy energy. He clenches his teeth from tension when suddenly an amphibian man appears behind him and says with a sly grin, he caught him. Yu is lost when suddenly he again attacks his green cloud of energy right in the back. Jong-yu spits blood from his mouth and falls straight onto the roof. When an explosion occurs, he is thrown onto a large pile of construction bags nearby. A man approaching him smugly asks, did he think he could hide in the shadows? He didn't stand a chance. After that, he laughs and hits him again. His fists, surrounded by energy, deliver crushing blows. Yu tries to cover himself with his hands, but suddenly he is very surprised. What is happening? Is his shadow form collapsing? The shadow does not cover the entire body. He will not be able to use his skills. The amphibian man grabs him by the head, and shadow particles immediately fly off to the side. The mask gradually falls off Jong-yu's face, and the man tightly clenches his fist and says, okay, now they will see who he is. The amphibian man raises his hand above Yu's head, smiling at them not maliciously. But at that moment, stones fall on his head. Looking up, he sees children throwing bricks at him and screaming, he must let go of Yu immediately. He is bad. He will definitely be caught. But he, trying to shield himself from the blows with his hand, answers them, what are these scoundrels doing? While he is trying to throw a stone at the children in response, Jong-yu crawls up to him and, gathering his last strength, he grabs him from the back, reminding him that it is he who is his opponent. Mentally, he thanks the children for their action. Jumping out of the shadows activates the shadow pupil. Many shadow eyes appear around the man and watch him. He gets angry and yells at Yu to get away from him. After his blow, the man flies forward and turns around. Jong-yu, ready to continue the fight, looks at him. The amphibian man, pointing his finger at him, clarifies, did the stalker think he could stop him by dragging the shadow layer? He will kill him. Little children will no longer help him. But in response, he seriously says, finally his blood is under control, but why did he need to kidnap children? He sticks out a long snake tongue and explains, naturally, because the souls of children are purer. he should listen to his family. After these words, his pupils seem to flare up with a green flame. He remembers how Dr. Wu walked up to the monster in the tank and greeted number 9. He mentally repeats his words should he listen. Now he understands what happened in Chiang's laboratory. The monster approaches him, and the man clarifies did he satisfy his curiosity. Then he must die now. After snapping their fingers, others immediately become indignant. Monsters surround him from all sides, but Zhang Yu cunningly says that he will die only after them. Yu is surrounded by black smoke and stretches the material between his hands. Further, hooking the resulting web to others, he thanks the man for the gift. The monsters try to escape, but they fail. And then Zhang Yu exclaims he returns everything. When attacking others, he uses chase mark, decapitation, and shadow bite. The system notifies him that he receives 6 shadow points. He has 81 shadow points out of 90. The amphibian man, watching what is happening, cannot believe it. It cannot be. This guy can absorb others. Zhang Yu, plunging into the shadows, forms a huge luminous funnel. He uses shadow bite again, and System 4 notifies him that he has received 6 points. The man gets angry and shouts, "Things are bad. This can't be." He tries to break through it, using the balls, also striking, but is immediately thrown aside. The man says it's a nightmare. He can only use the blood. A large purple formation covered in black shadow lightning suddenly appears in front of him. Watching this, he begins to repeat growth, growth, cultivation. Inside the formation, he sees a movement and suddenly rushes away and curses, "This is a real nightmare. This guy is a real freak." He understands it's too dangerous now, especially and too cunning. This is the first time he has seen these monsters being consumed. By the way, isn't this guy different then? Just thinking about it, he looks forward and stops. A pink funnel appears in black streams. Then the streams change into blue energy discharges and 2 swords form in Zhang Yu's hand. He just says contentedly, now it's his turn. Yu approaches the man and takes a deep breath. He is surrounded by black streams, and he notes that he only has the 2nd rank, and already it feels as if he got rid of everything bad and released it into the wild. He clutches the sword tighter in his hand and continues to think, the sky and earth are clearly visible, everything takes on new colors. Even human fear is very clearly felt. He wants to play. Zhang Yu plunges into the shadows with an evil smile and instantly disappears, leaving only clouds of dust around. The amphibian man, surprised by this, asks the question, did he dive into the shadow? No, this time he completely disappeared. Directing others forward, he adds, the guy wants to attack him. He won't let this happen. Suddenly, bright white discharges pierce the air. The monsters are subjected to a series of blows, which also feels like him. Grabbing the place of the blow, he angrily notes that he cannot see the guy's attack. He's too fast. What kind of monster is he? How can a person with the 2nd rank be so strong? Yu at this moment, being right in front of him in a transparent state, thinks it's interesting. He doesn't see anything. It's all written all over his face. Now he can hide in deeper shadows. Many blows fall on the man. He clenches his teeth and says what a freak he is. Zhang Yu at this moment feels like he is a big black cat playing with a mouse and thinks how much fun he is playing with his prey. The amphibian man screams desperately, he must kill him if he wants, but he must stop mocking. He must come closer immediately. Yu at the same moment appears behind him, presenting a sword blade to his throat and replies, okay, it will be as he says. The man hisses with displeasure when suddenly Zhang Yu, with his peripheral vision, notices something heading towards him. He is thrown back, and he, cutting the brick flying towards him with a sword, asks what is this? At that moment, a huge man with steel muscles appears on the roof and, turning to the amphibious man, asks what Zhu Shan is even doing. They waited for him for half a day. The boss is angry if he doesn't know this. Shan clarifies, did the head send Zhao Yongcheng here? He points to the portal behind him and explains that the plan begins now. Zhu Shan must pick up the children, and he will completely sort it out here. He immediately runs away and finally says, okay. He leaves this patient to him. But then Zhang Yu appears next to him, shouting that he should not dare touch the children. A brick flies towards him, and then Yongcheng attacks. Yu turns, ready to strike back. Zhao Yongcheng touches the ground, creating a shock wave, but he manages to jump up. Afterwards, he begins to dissolve into the shadows, but Shan activates his ring, and Zhang Yu is immediately engulfed in black rings with a green glow. He freezes in surprise, and Zhu Shan mockingly asks, he wants to hide again. It just won't work like that anymore. Yongcheng immediately punches Yu in the face, to which he joyfully shouts like that. He must kill him. Suddenly, a whole series of shadow blows appears on his body, which cuts off his finger and legs. Zhu Shan freezes with a shocked expression on his face and falls to the floor, and the gold ring from his finger rolls straight towards Zhang Yu. Zhao Yongcheng, observing this, says, the guy has good skills. By any chance, he doesn't work on what patrol? Why does he interfere in their affairs? But he just exclaims in response, "What kind of nonsense? They use children to conduct experiments on others. How can he not interfere?" With these words, he takes out a sword with a long, sharp blade from the shadows and adds, "He is not a hero. He never wanted to become one. He sticks to what he thinks is right, that's all." Yongcheng grins after listening to him. What does he think is right? Then he makes a terrible statement: if he saves the children, then all of humanity will be destroyed. Does he also think this is correct? Yu asks in bewilderment, what is he talking about? Does he mean that he kidnaps children to save the world? What kind of joke is this? But he answers quite seriously. He knows that the war between people and others has been going on for hundreds of years, and only thanks to their efforts they are still alive. However, others are still much stronger than them. Human power is like fire, which is simply not able to illuminate everything around. Instead of dying a painful death, they found another way out. Since the darkness is invincible, you need to adapt to it. Bury hope deep in your heart and just wait for the fire to finally start that will respond to all of humanity. With these words, Zhao Yongcheng's eyes seemed to burn with fire. But Zhang Yu noted with disbelief, chuckling, it seems to him that he is simply justifying his actions. If the fire species thinks alike, then it will destroy them all. A violet glow begins to emanate from him, and he says he comes out, it's useless to talk to him. Then he must behold the power of the fiery form. Yu swings his sword and attacks Yongcheng. He deflects the attack by kicking him. Zhang Yu frowns contentedly, and then with a sharp movement tries to inflict many blows on him, but this time he resists it without much difficulty. Zhao Yongcheng clenches his fists tightly, hitting Yu with a swing. A large explosion occurs, which turns pink. Yongcheng grits his teeth and sighs heavily. When the smoke clears, Zhang Yu finds himself sitting near the wall, holding his bleeding wound and exclaims, "This guy is very strong." Removing his hand from his chest, Yu says in bewilderment, "The wound is not healing. What happened?" Yongcheng approaches him and says with pleasure, "This flame strike is a special skill." Hearing this, he frowns and repeats, "The skill is special." Zhao Yongcheng, towering over him and activating the energy in his right palm, asks, he can't even defeat him. What would have happened to him under different conditions? In the face of absolute power, he is helpless. That's it, that's the end. But in response, Zhang Yu suddenly says, yes, he is right. After yesterday, he said, smiling aptly. A red triangle appears on Yongcheng's chest. He does not understand what is happening, and they ask what. But just as suddenly, he finds himself among many eyes fixed on him. Tears appear in his eyes, and he plaintively asks how this is possible. How did he end up here? No, he doesn't want to die. He needs help. Among the endless space, Yu approaches him and asks, does he see this? It is the fear that lurks deep in his heart. Saving humanity is just an excuse, and fear is the true reason for his actions. They are all like this in a fiery form. After these words, he raises the shadow sword above his head and adds that the fiery species is just a group of thugs. Zhao Yongcheng, hearing this, gets angry and seems to inhale steam through his teeth. Then he rushes at him screaming, he must shut up immediately. Zhang Yu activates the chase, and the very next moment he pierces him with the sword. A trickle of blood flows from the corner of Yongcheng's mouth, and he sadly asks, what? Turns out he's just a guy. Falling on his back, he sighs heavily and reasons, it's not surprising that the guy is so fearless, once he was also so energetic. But his ignorance and fearlessness have long since dissipated. In the end, the same fate awaits him. You just need to wait. At the end, a small pink cloud of energy slowly fades away. The girl holding the microphone energetically greets the audience. The presenter Shuishui is with them. Behind her, they can see the Chang building. Literally an hour ago, a fire broke out in the building and several others escaped to freedom. The building was completely charred. Traces of a battle between the special and the others were found. The girl lying on a stretcher and with tears in her eyes says that she was saved by Yo. Shuishui continues to talk. It also became known that many victims were saved thanks to the streamer with the nickname Yo. Having learned that several children had been kidnapped at the scene, he immediately rushed to search for them. There is no news, so they can only pray that the children return safely. Immediately after this, one of the men points to the side and shouts, Yo is back. Zhang Yu's silhouette is seen in the distance, surrounded by small children. Reporters immediately rush to him with enthusiastic exclamations, it's him. Everyone should see it. It's so wonderful. Yu, leading the children closer to the people, stops, and when they notice this, they turn around. He apologizes, they have to go. He can't go further with them. The children hug him warmly, and the little girl sheepishly thanks him. Children, surrounded by military personnel, run away to their parents and families. It's beautiful sunny weather outside. After a while, Zhang Yu enters the apartment and, sighing heavily, says, finally he is home. Suddenly, he notices Lu Yayao in the living room on the sofa. She sits with her knees drawn up and looks at him with tears in her eyes. There are cold dishes on the table. His face immediately becomes sad, and trying to diffuse the atmosphere, he pulls out a tray from his backpack and says he's very sorry that he came so late. He decided to run into the store for eggs, but on the way something happened to him, so he was delayed. An awkward silence hangs in the room. She continues to cry and answers in disbelief. He is lying again. He is deceiving her like a child. You, trying to get into a comfortable position, clarify, what is it? Did she think he was dead? Yao jumps to the floor and screams, it would be better if he were already dead. Then she wants to hit him, but he intercepts her fist, and then she angrily tells him to let her go. But Jong-yu pulls her closer, looking straight into her eyes and says no. The lamps on the ceiling brightly illuminate the room, and he, putting his hand on her cheek, asks, has she tried it yet? Lu Yao asks in bewilderment, what hasn't she tried yet? Yu, without explaining anything, again says strangely, she need not be afraid, they are no longer children. Yao repeats in confusion that she hasn't tried it yet. Jong-yu, as if he hadn't heard her questions, says he doesn't either, maybe they should try. She asks, confused, what is he talking about? Can he say it more clearly? At this moment, he approaches her face and kisses her. She immediately opens her eyes in surprise and, sharply pushing him away, screams, what is he doing? Yu is very embarrassed, but without showing it, he says, nothing, I was just thirsty, that's why it happened. Lu Yao, covering his mouth with his hand, asks again, was he thirsty? But he immediately takes the plates of food and asks, has she already eaten? He wants to warm it up. Watching him quickly run into the kitchen, she clenches her fists. Jong-yu puts the plate with the dish in the microwave and thinks with relief he was on the verge of life and death. His stomach felt so hot when he kissed her, he thought she would kill him. What soft lips she had. Yu starts dancing happily and exclaims, this was as a reward for the battle. Yao looked around the corner and looked at him with embarrassment and thought, he is a fool. Soon they were sitting at the table opposite each other, and in front of them were plates of delicious food. She ate carefully, looking away to the side, and Jong-yu was in a hurry and ate very quickly and in large pieces. Having opened the system window, he thought, I wonder how much his abilities have increased after the battle. The system showed his profile. His attribute is Shadow. Shadow scores are 105 out of 105. He has the status of Stalker Killer. Being a Stalker, he has Shadow Pupil, Shadow Bite, Hidden Shadow, Shadow Combat. Like a hunter, he has a mark, Continuous Killing. Life expectancy 12 days. According to the assessment, he looks strong, but in reality, he is weak. Using the Hidden Shadow ability, he can dive into shadows to move freely between them. Using the Shadow Claw, his hands turn into a blade with extremely traumatic force. He must pay attention to the fact that flexibility is important. Using Continuous Kill, his number of attacks constantly accumulates, eventually forming a very powerful shockwave. Killing involves promotion after continuous killing. This is an improved version of the Shadow shape. It can move more smoothly in the shadows. An improved version of the Hunter has also appeared. Now he can spend less points. After reading this carefully, Yu notes, the Hidden Shadow must be a slightly modified skill of a simple shadow shape. Continuous killing is also quite an excellent skill, but the conditions for its implementation are quite harsh. Red is the color of the enemy. Green is the color of an ally. White are passers-by. But looking up, he is surprised. Yao seeing this too. And then, crossing his arms, asks why he's looking like that. She warns him not to do anything strange again. But Jong-yu, with his mouth wide open, thinks, what does pink mean? Yu smiles and understands. Now everything is clear to him, a pink sign that she loves him. Lu Yao, watching his dreamy expression, says how strange he is. Suddenly, he and she suddenly turn around at a loud sound. They go out onto the balcony and look up, transfixed. Beautiful pink and blue fireworks appear in the air. They silently watch this for a while, and then Yu asks, by the way, does she know anything about the fire video? Yao is surprised, fiery appearance. Where did he hear about this? But he comes closer to her and clarifies, so she still knows. She confirms this, yes, there is a mention of a fiery form in her father's information. They represent a group that acts independently, pursuing only its own goals. An organization that betrayed humanity for its own agenda. They brainwash people, so it's better not to mess with them. By the way, if he discovers a member of the fire species, then he should immediately go to the Night Watch, given that they will give him 500,000. As soon as Jong-yu hears this amount, he screams in shock, 500,000. Lu Yao asks worriedly, what is it? But he sharply tries to contain his emotions and answers, nothing special. At this moment, he realizes that he is left without 1 million. Then he awkwardly clarifies, besides the fiery appearance, are there other countries of the organization? And what is the reward for them? She, adopting a serious expression on her face, explains that there are no such people. But what? He thinks that there are such people. Yu just chuckles and answers he's just thinking about what he can make money from. Yao, after thinking for a few moments, adds that there are also rewards for other organizations, but not the same as for education. Zhang Yu clarifies enlightenment. She explains that this is a contradictory organization, seemingly an ally, but fundamentally different from them. They believe that humanity will be defeated and are looking for a way to escape. For example, move to another planet. Yu is surprised. It's like some kind of science fiction film, doesn't he think so? Spaceships can't be built for everyone, can they? But she explains that it is not necessary to rely on technology in this matter. Others, after all, live in another world where there is no technology. But they strive to bypass all the cracks and get into their world. And if enlightenment achieves the same results as others, it will not be easy to stop the spinning wheel. The days pass calmly, flying by one after another. The holidays have gradually passed. Some went to work, others to study. Since Zhang Yu has ascended to the second rank, he can easily exterminate others of the first level without any difficulty. Sometimes it can increase life expectancy by 3 days in just 24 hours. All the tests are over, so it's time for you to get ready for the training camp. Liu Yuqiang has already gone there, and he is the last one left and is leaving tomorrow. Just the night before leaving, Lai Zhengyuan returned. He, holding a gray folder in his hands, said with a serious expression on his face, he heard that his power had been discovered. The Night Watch group is being recruited. He is very cool. Zhang Yu turns to him with a smile and asks Uncle Lai, wasn't he in Beidou? What's wrong with his hand? He sat down on the sofa and put his bag next to him and explained that it's okay. This year he has a lot of workload and no free time at all. By the way, in addition to its golden light, something else was added. Yu sat down next to him and asked excitedly, so what? What is it? What level is he? Can he do more harm? Zhengyuan will answer with a frown, who knows. Someday they will see it. At this moment, he noted, no wonder, that Zhang Yu had seemed unusual to him earlier. He thought he would fail the tests, but he showed his abilities well, even ending up at the 6th level. But it seems to him that this guy is clearly not special. There is some kind of mistake here. Yu sits down on a chair nearby and says, by the way, he recently met a man named Song Kingen. He said he was the general's uncle. This is true. Lai Zhengyuan looks at him incredulously at first, but then sadly lowers his head and says, yes. He is very surprised. What? So is this true? It turns out that he is one of the 5 strongest. But Zhengyuan explains with a sigh, to be more precise, this is already in the past. He was about 40 years old when he left the front line. At that time, he was full of energy. He immediately got into trouble with countless horns. Then his goals were quite simple. It was to exterminate all others for the sake of everyone's safety. But it turned out there were too many of them, and it took more than 20 years. In the end, his wife died from the pollution of others, and he had to change his activity. The once invincible general became disabled. This time, Beidou showed up with quite strong others. Giant Yu immediately waves his hand in front of him and exclaims, no. Does his uncle think he can't handle it and will retreat? Never. He also wants to become a general, just like him. Lai Zhengyuan frowned at him, stood up and put her hand in her pocket and said, well, he was noticed, so there is no turning back. Then he takes out a medallion from which a glow emanates and explains that he must hang it on his body. Yu, taking it in his hands, clarifies, what is this? Is this a pendant? But he explains that it is a secret thing called yin shadow. After he puts it on, he will hear a lot more different sounds. If he wears it for a long time, his willpower will be greatly strengthened and will help his training. But negative emotions also increase, so he must wear the pendant at intervals of 3 days. Additionally, it can activate when unusual energy is detected, releasing contaminated energy. Combat power will increase significantly in a very short period of time, but you can only use it once. Zhang Yu asks in shock, polluted energy. Does this thing come from the shadow layer? Zhengyuan grins pleasantly. Well, he's not bad. That's right, that's where it comes from. Such prohibited things come from another world, and due to their use, a certain fee is charged. The cost of use will depend only on his willpower and qualifications. If his strength is above level 5, then he can safely wear it. And the most amazing thing is that it recognizes people. Yu fastens the chain and notes with interest, well, he'll try. As soon as he puts it on, Lai Zhengyuan immediately circles around him and asks, so, what does it feel like? Zhang Yu notes in surprise that it's strange that there seems to be no sound. Hearing this, he smiles and says, it seems that his willpower is resisting the influence of the pendant. Now he can be calm. Well, they'll keep an eye on this. They'll come back later. Yu obediently agrees, okay. Then he says goodbye to him. When the starry night comes, he is fast asleep in bed, and moonlight pours on him from the window. Unexpectedly, energy begins to emanate from the pendant, filling the room. Zhang Yu, rubbing his sleepy eyes, finds himself in an unusual space and wonders where he is. Is he on some road? Looking ahead, he exclaims, what is this? Purple bubbles are approaching him. In one of them, there is a girl. She is desperately moaning, "Don't." She doesn't want someone screaming in her ears. Yu looks at these bubbles with people in them. Above his head, the man is holding back a huge fireball. Another soldier, dissolving, screams, "It hurts," and it hurts a lot. It kills him. The rest of the people, who all have pendants hanging around their necks, are desperately screaming. They need help. They don't want it. This is a curse. A curse. They don't want to own it. Jong Yu, watching them, said excitedly, "Is this really a memory from the pendant?" These are the owners. The next day, early in the morning, the city is in full swing with life. Lu Yayao yawns while sitting in the back seat of the car. Yu, sitting next to her, asks, "Did she not get enough sleep?" She agrees yes, she didn't sleep all night because she was very worried. What about him? He smiles and answers, "Is he?" He slept without his hind legs, seeing wonderful dreams. At this moment, he thinks he cannot remember yesterday's dream. Shadow pendant. I think I heard it speak. After Jong Yu puts his hand on Yayao's shoulder and, pulling her closer, explains that if she is tired, she can lie down and rest. She immediately says no, never. But Yu reassures her she shouldn't worry, he won't do anything. But immediately he gets closer to her face when suddenly Lee coughs displeasedly. He looks in the rearview mirror and says, "There are quite a lot of bad people in the training camp. Yayao should be more serious." Does she understand this? She, continuing to look at Jong Yu's frightened expression, replies, "Of course." At this moment he thinks, is he hinting at bad people, including him? Lee adds, by the way, when they arrive on site, they must follow the instructions of the instructor. If something happens to them, they should definitely call him. Lu Yayao notes that Dad talks about this all the way. But Yu immediately kindly says he shouldn't worry. He's here, so everything will be fine. But at this moment he thinks with dissatisfaction, it is because of him that he is worried. Soon they arrive at the training base, and Lee announces that they are there. They get out of the car, and Yayao says goodbye. In that case, they will go. He reminds her she must use the phone. As soon as they leave hand in hand, Lee notices this and leans out of the car window with displeasure and says, "He's a real sly guy." Jong Yu says thoughtfully, "I wonder what the training camp looks like." Lu Yayao suddenly withdraws his palm and asks, is he planning to die? Her dad is watching. But he says slightly in his mind, everything is fine. They've always been together, there's nothing strange about that. Her father has nothing to worry about. But she replies, grunting and dissatisfied, that he should stop already. Soon, when a crowd of people is standing on the platform, someone says loudly, "The carriage is approaching, they can get on." People go inside and take their seats. Jong Yu, with a relaxed expression